across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, good afternoon. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's off for a sweltering bank holiday week, extended bank holiday weekend, back on Tuesday. Coming up on the show today, Downing Street review. I thought this was really interesting, but not surprising, refusing to confirm if Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, will stay in his role. They were keeping a bit stum on that. This, of course, all comes as Labour clashes over net zero on the day that it's announced that house builders must install solar panels on all new homes in the next 2 years. Man alive. They've got to build 1.5 million of these things. Now they've got to whack panels on the top. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Also this afternoon, transgender women are to be banned from playing women's football in England following the Supreme Court ruling on single-sex spaces. We'll have more details on that as well. And this one's a beauty, as you've been hearing. I think this got the award this morning on Mike's show. A Ghanaian asylum seeker has won the right to remain in the UK because apparently he's too traumatised by getting COVID to return to his home country. Cough twice at the appeal process and you're in, mate. That's how it seems to work down there. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Now, here's the question. Have you ever held your nose and embraced the green revolution? Hear me out on this. There's a reason I mentioned it. We talk a lot about green issues, of course. Lots of voices coming in. But this is interesting. We've reached a really strange time on this debate. And there's more than one story kind of wraps this thing together here. We've now got the unions warning that Labour risk their net zero plans backfiring and becoming a millstone for the government. This is the Unite Union, very powerful union in that world. They're talking about potential lack of investment in new jobs and therefore they're having none of it. I should also add, as I mentioned at the beginning, it comes at the same time as Number 10 refuses to guarantee that Ed Miliband will keep his job. I think the smart money, I think if you went down to Paddy Power or William Hill, any of those places, I think they'd open a good book on the fact that Miliband will not be in situ in 12 months' time. Meanwhile, just to compound all of this, Norway has said they've got no plans to turn their back on oil produced in the North Sea. We've closed it all up. We've completely turned our back on it, sealed it up. This is no more. We're not going to do anything oil-based over there. The Norwegian energy minister just applied a bit of brevity to it, really, and said we want to develop the North Sea for long-term because the oil and the gas industry and the service industry are really important to us. They say, this is the Norwegians, they say it saves jobs and creates a lot of value for money for Norwegian society. Can we not just get this bloke to replace Ed Miliband, maybe? And while all of this is going on, we hear today that almost every new home in England at least, stand by Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, but England at least will be fitted with solar panels as standard within 2 years. House builders will be mandated by law to install them on new properties by 2027. Now, I would imagine if you are planning to build a couple of thousand homes as a construction company, you probably already have your plans and your budgets in place if you're hoping to have these things done by 2027. As a result of all very worthy stuff, and it means a house will be £4,000 more expensive because of it. But who cares when you're saving the human race from death? And it's on this point that I think we should have a little bit of a focus this in terms of making your house environmentally sound. Have you taken the plunge into solar panel heaven? Did you strip off your roof tiles, those conventional slate things on the top, and whack on a dozen shiny sun-reflecting panels? And maybe, and perhaps more interestingly, what was your reason for doing it? Was it to save the Costa Rican golden toad from inevitable extinction, or was it because you now pay nothing to heat your house? And so the point of this conversation, which I want to hear from you, is if you, like, solar panels have been around for a long, long time. I'm pretty sure that when I was a kid, there was a house we used to pass on the way to school that had panels on the roof. So that would have been at best in the early 80s. Is that possible? Have you know how your brain plays tricks on you? I don't think anybody knew what they were or even questioned really what they were. I don't even know if the people that moved into it put them there or whether they've been there before. No idea at all. But of course, people come at these arguments from many different angles. You don't have to be Chris Packham or Dale Vince, and we'll speak to Dale a little later in this hour, you'll be pleased to know. You don't have to be those guys to go, well, if I can save money and my electricity doesn't cost me anything and I can afford to put the panels on, then what's not to like? Have you got solar panels? 0344 499 1000. Have you got a heat pump? Now, the world does very much divide on heat pumps, and I sense they are the Betamax of the heating world. So let's wait and see. But have you got one? And does it work? These things are pretty enormous, sort of big, far bigger than a boiler, massive things. You've got to have somewhere to put it. The infrastructure within your house is different. The pipes are different sizes. The radiators are different sizes. And it doesn't quite work in the same conventional sense. But if you've got a heat pump, I want to hear from you. I don't think I've ever met anyone with a heat pump. I honestly don't think I'm aware of anyone with a heat pump. Are you that person? Are you Pump Central in the heat department? This one's a bit more ambitious. Have you got a windmill? Because you know there's domestic ones of these that you can buy now. I don't know how little they are. I'd imagine they're still quite big because they've got to generate the wind. Have you got a windmill in the garden? Have you got an EV? And I guess the point here is that lots of people do venture down this line, but not necessarily from an environmental perspective. And those on the environmental side of the argument are quite relaxed about that. They don't care as long as you're doing it. But have you gone down that route? I was talking to a woman who's a property investor, and she was saying, when it you know the EPC rating on your house that tells you, you know, how efficient your home is in terms of energy. And if you live in an older property, then it's probably like a D or something. I think by 2030, certainly in the rental market, landlords have got to get their properties to a C rating. And she had a property, it was an old thing, it was a D rating. She went hell for leather on doing everything. She triple glazed it, she put the underfloor kind of insulation in there. She went up the loft and lagged it not once but twice. They pumped the walls full of that cavity wall stuff, did all manner of things. A fella comes round from the council and she's thinking, wow, this is going to be interesting because it was a D. I've spent about 30 grand and what's he going to come up with? And he looked at his clipboard, he looked round the house, he went in the loft, he nipped down the cellar and he went, yes, still a D. And she went, how can it still be a D? It's not possible. Turns out there wasn't really much science behind this EPC rating thing. It was sort of a little bit ad hoc, a little bit casual. This was some years ago, she said. It might have changed now, and I'm sure very impressive people with very impressive degrees have got the EPC, first in EPC rating skills. Maybe that's the case. But you hear where I'm coming from here. We do take calls from time to time from people who say, yeah, I've got solar panels on my roof. My annual electricity bill was £1.50. I also use it to charge my car. Right, so you charge your car at home, your electricity comes from the panels, you pay no bills, and it costs you nothing to drive your car. Right, I would say that's a good deal. If you have to pay 20 grand to get the panels on there to start with, then that's potentially, 20 years worth or whatever your annual bill is, 15 years worth, 10 years, whatever it is, before you can say I'm breaking even. But if once you've got to that point, what's not to like? Have you taken the plunge and embraced the green revolution, even if you didn't do it for the kind of green reasons? 0344 499 1000. Second question, connected, are you considering it? Is it something you would actually do? I wouldn't be able to get solar panels on my roof, but if somebody said, yeah, if you invest 3 grand and your bills are going to come down by 2/3, I would say, yeah, all right, I'll do it. I wouldn't necessarily be thinking of wider reasons why I'm doing it. And if I could charge my car, I haven't got an electric car, but if I did, then happy days, right? What's not to like? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs, political commentator, is back with us. Chloe, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
I'm good. Nice. I was hoping you'd be sort of, have a windmill behind you or something, or sitting on top of one, or one on top of your head, maybe. I don't know. These things are apparently very portable these days. You can get one for your own garden.
Yeah, I haven't got a portable wind turbine, I'm afraid. I think the closest I've ever come to it is one of those little face fans that you can buy for the hot weather, which this week people might need.
Chloe. It all mounts up. If we all did that, we'd be net zero within a fortnight.
I'm sure.
Well, it's worth having a little listen to Ed Miliband. Keir Starmer, of course, has rejected Tony Blair's criticisms of Labour's net zero policies, which we talked about yesterday. There is, of course, a lot of pressure on the government in this area. Ministers planning to mandate solar panels on nearly all new homes. This is by 2027, claiming it will cut energy bills, even though it's going to add about £4,000 to building costs. Let's have a listen to the evangelist himself, Ed Miliband's original net zero plans. Here they are.
The news that energy bills are rising is going to be worrying for many families. It's happening because we're so reliant on fossil fuels, in particular gas. And the markets that determine the price of those fossil fuels are controlled by the decisions of petrostates and dictators. So we've seen a 15% rise in the price of wholesale gas. What's government going to do? We're going to have your back. We're going to expand the warm homes discount to protect vulnerable families. We're going to insulate and have energy efficiency for more homes. And we're going to ensure that the regulator is really tough with those companies so we get best value for money for consumers. And the truth is, the most important thing we can do is stick to our clean power mission. Homegrown, clean power that we control. Solar, wind, nuclear. That's the way we get off the roller coaster of fossil fuel prices. That's the way we take back control of our energy security. That's the government's mission for our country.
Wow. Do you know what, Chloe? That is not a government minister. That is the Messiah, right? Right there. There he is, imparting his wisdom and saving the planet. What a nice man.
Yeah, he really does act like a messiah and just so ideological rather than practical. And some of the things he is saying, I understand where he is coming from, in that I do think for energy security, we need to have a mixture of different energy sources and we should grow renewables. But, he mentions the fact there that we are reliant on dictators and whatnot for our fossil fuels. But then why would you stop new oil licenses in the North Sea, for example? Why would you say you're going to put cement down the last gas wells in the country when we are only just starting to bring in renewables? We are nowhere near 100% able to rely on renewables, and it's not like we can click our fingers and we don't need any petrol or any oil or anything by tomorrow. It is just complete idiocy, and clearly he is starting to feel the pressure now because people with a bit of common sense are now starting to turn against him. We're seeing, we just seen Norway are saying you're an idiot, basically. Tony Blair is even turning against his own party, saying this is stupid. The union's turning against the party. So yeah, it really does not make sense what he is doing. Part of the plan in moving towards renewables gradually makes sense, but trying to end the use of fossil fuels overnight, as he is trying to do, is just going to turn more people in this country against being environmentally friendly, because they're thinking, wow, my bills are shooting up because we've cut off new oil licenses and whatnot, and it's going to make barely any difference to global warming.
Indeed, and that was Tony Blair's point, wasn't it? I mean, it was one of those rare moments. I said yesterday, Tony Blair's normally about as welcome as measles into any conversation, but here he was yesterday. There seemed to be a bit of sense there, and you're right to allude to the Norwegians, and they've just very logically said they've got no plans to turn their back on oil produced from the North Sea. Their energy minister said they want to develop the North Sea for the long term because oil, gas and the service industry are really important. They say it creates jobs, value for money for Norwegian society. Just thinking logically about it, whereas Miliband's gone, how can we seal up the gas pipes and move on?
Yeah, exactly. It, as I said before, is just purely ideological, and we're seeing some really stupid things happening, like forests being felled and cut down to make way for fields of solar panels. That to me doesn't really make sense. That is one reason why I might potentially be in favor of this solar panels on homes thing, because that means not using precious farmland and forests and ditching those to have all these fields of solar panels instead. It might also relieve some of the pressure on the national grid. You've heard these ridiculous stories of us building a bunch of wind turbines and then having to turn them all off because the national grid can't cope. That's one thing they really need to address. And if there's a solar panel on your home and then you're able to use that energy straight away rather than it having to go to the grid, maybe that helps things a little bit. But I really do think that a bit of common sense is needed, and it's going to be a really difficult decision for Starmer deciding what to do with Ed Miliband. You've heard them now refusing to confirm whether his job is safe, but the problem they've got is even if they want to get rid of Ed Miliband, he is very popular in the grassroots of the party. They absolutely love him. Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy, those are the favourites, whereas Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, they are bottom of the list, not really liked by the party at all. So it's a very difficult thing for Keir Starmer to, think about potentially firing Ed Miliband. But it'll be interesting to see if Ed Miliband is, with a bit of pushing, able to make some concessions, say, okay, maybe we will allow some new oil licenses, maybe we will
just be logical. We all want a better environment. I've never met a single person in the world ever that says, I want a dirtier environment. Of course we do. But there's a logical way to do things, and there's no reason why some of this new technology can't run in tandem with what we currently have. And until everything is tickety-boo and they can store sun and wind energy and the like, once they've got to that, and then we can go, yeah, all right, we don't need that oil stuff anymore. It's ridiculous, but we needed it for a bit. I got this one in from Simon, Chloe, who says, I pay no bills with my newly installed solar array, and I can charge my car every night. And by the way, my panels only cost me £30,000. I think he's probably making an ironic point there, but that is the reality, isn't it? That, it's 30 grand. If you had to pay that out, even if it was 10,000, not many people could just stump that up.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, and I don't have solar panels. I'm not an expert on how much they cost and how amazing they are at generating energy. We heard the figures from this story that we're hearing about them being put on all new build homes that it will only cost £4,000. I think that needs to be looked at with a bit of scrutiny and say, is that actually the case? Is it actually the case people will save £1,000 a year? Let's get other people to verify those figures before we, go down that route, put it into law, and then find out that it's making homes, 30-40 grand more expensive when it need not be.
Indeed, and that's one of the big issues around this. Stay with us, Chloe. More stories to come. We are of course going to talk about the curious story of what is happening with the Ghanaian asylum seeker. You might be familiar with the nuts and bolts of that. It's just another one to add to the list of insanity. What's happening with women's football? There's some good news on that front. More to come, and of course you as well. 0344 499 1000. Have you inadvertently embraced the kind of green revolution? By getting panels, like the EV car, panels on the house, a heat pump. I never met anybody with a heat pump. Do they work? Are they any good? What do they cost? Is it worth it? Do you get a subsidy to fit the darn thing? I think you used to. 0344 499 1000.
Whenever the Blair creature comes out and says something that I agree with, then it worries me very, very much indeed. Where have I gone wrong? I rush out and go and put sun cream on the cat to calm my nerves. But it is very odd. I don't know. I think there must be people. And long ago, the late Nigel Lawson said to the global warming people, look, you may be right, you may be wrong, but your approach of actually trying to strangle the economy to prevent this from happening is the wrong one. But whenever
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Happy May Day, by the way. Never really quite sure what the implications of May Day are, but it's the hottest 1st of May on record. That's what's happening here. That's the evidence, if ever there was evidence needed, that the planet is dying. It's the hottest May on record. Chloe Dobbs is with us. Did you know this, Chloe? Don't celebrate the sun. This is a terrible, terrible day. Oh, by the way, the temperature halves on Sunday, goes back to normal. But they won't say much about that, I don't suppose. So there we are.
Well, I have to say I'm quite enjoying the heat wave, to be honest. I'm definitely not complaining. And I always think it's funny how the lefties will never say a word when we have a really cold snap. I mean, I thought this winter was quite cold and miserable, to be honest, that we've just had, but they didn't seem to be saying, oh, you know, the planet's cooling. So I always think in England, you should never really use England as a way to measure what's happening with global warming.
No.
Because it's because of the Gulf Stream and everything, our climate is like, it could be getting warmer elsewhere in the world.
And
but
it
because
kills
of
me.
weird things with the Gulf Stream, it's colder here. So I just wouldn't speculate at all. Just enjoy the warm weather, everyone, and chill out.
It kills me that it's 28 degrees today, and on Sunday it's going to be like 12 degrees. I mean, that's more than a halving of the temperature. On a bank holiday, only British weather would be that sneaky. Let's move to this story. A new Channel migrant scandal has emerged as a British Border Force vessel rescued asylum seekers, but from French waters. Now, this is despite agreements requiring France to handle those kind of incidents. Still sounds like Starmer's original plan, does it? What do you think? Let's take a reminder of what Mr. Starmer is planning and how he's going to solve the problem.
You will have helped to smash the gangs. Take those gangs down. Smashing the gangs. No shortcut. Smash the criminal gangs. No gimmicks. Have to smash those gangs. Just the hard graft of sleeves rolled up. Smash the gangs. Practical government. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. We will smash the gangs that undermine our security. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
Smash the gangs.
The Speakle-Maggling guns. Yes, that's the one, Chloe. So I don't know what he's smashing, but smashing all sorts of records for ineptitude, I think, at the moment. And when you've got the British Border Force going into French waters, you have to go, hang on a second, we already knew this story was royally messed up. This is another level.
I mean, it is just absolutely infuriating hearing that the British Border Force are doing the job of the French, having to go into French waters. And I can understand, when I first saw this story, I thought, oh, maybe they saw just over the line a dinghy, you know, in distress, people potentially drowning, and there was no French vessel anywhere near to save them. I could understand it, because you are meant to help people in distress at sea. But when I then read that actually there was a French vessel following right behind them, you know, ferrying them up to the middle line of the channel as they do, yet they didn't bother to do anything, so Border Force decided to do it for them. I was just infuriated. They should have been picked up and taken back to French waters, but instead we've decided to give them, I'm sure, a nice cushy hotel here in the UK. And it's not like you cannot communicate with other vessels on the water, and they couldn't have, you know, they have radios on the boats. They've got the main channel where you can communicate with everyone else. They could have communicated with that French vessel and said, you need to pick these people up. Okay, so this is just completely unacceptable. And just on the broader picture, smashing the gangs, absolutely nothing is happening. The crossings are up. I know they say these things take time, but it's just getting worse and they're not doing anything meaningful. And they told us they're going to end the use of asylum seeker hotels in this country. But I don't think they quite realised what we wanted when we said we wanted the hotels stopped. We wanted them to actually stop the boats coming in the first place to reduce the use of them. But instead, they've decided the way we'll solve the problem and say, yes, we've ticked that priority off, is to put them all into private rented accommodation.
Yay.
And, you know, I'm seeing plenty of videos coming out from young people, private renters, working class people who are absolutely furious, who've worked so hard and tried to pay their bills every single month.
You can't make this up.
Who are now being evicted by their landlords because their landlords are being offered 5-year guaranteed rent contracts. And I wouldn't be surprised if those contracts, because they're negotiated by governments and councils that are useless, are higher than the typical rent, which pushes up the prices for other people. I mean, less properties are available. It's just infuriating. They are so out of touch.
It is. Well, it's more than it's kind
of
it's criminal, really, as well. And of course, on top of all of that, any of those asylum seekers that arrive in the next by around about 2027 will have solar panels on their roofs as well. So you know, it's become a double bubble of doom, if you like. A couple of quick ones. We'll have to be quick on these two, Chloe. Transgender women are being banned from playing women's football, cricket and netball in England following the Supreme Court ruling, basically because they're not women. It's kind of as simple as that. 6-year-old could work this one out, but it needed to be stated and written large in print so that everybody could understand it. This is now football authorities, the FA confirming the ban, England netball confirming the ban, the ECB set to follow imminently as well. Just common sense, right?
Common sense is returning, and I couldn't be happier. This, as you say, a 6-year-old could figure this out, but these governing bodies who don't want to be seen to have a political opinion, they were in such a difficult position for so many years where they didn't want to upset anyone. If they took either side, then people were going to come at them like wolves. So now that they've got this independent ruling from the Supreme Court and can say, look, this isn't our opinion, we're just following the law, that's so much easier for them, and it's such a good win for female athletes who I'm sure are feeling very happy about this ruling, especially for something like football where you know, you can very easily get hurt, and I think having a biologically male footballer on the field with women who don't have the same strength and are lighter, I think could potentially cause some injuries. Yeah,
well, 100%. Boxing, of course, is the obvious area where there is huge controversy. And final one, it's big congratulations to Ethel Caterham. If people don't know who Ethel Caterham is, she's now in the record books. She's a proud Brit, and she's the world's oldest living person. She's 290 years old. Sorry, she's 115 years old. That's still very old, of course. She was born in 1909. I can't get my head around that.
I know. That's crazy. 1909. You know, she's been through both world wars.
She was 30 when the Second World War started.
I know, that's absolutely crazy. I mean, good on her. And she looks, if you've seen the picture, she looks well for her age at 115.
She looks
I reckon
incredible.
she's still potential. She could maybe go 10 more years. Who knows? Let's see. Very impressive. I feel inspired because my aim is to make it to 100 years. And what she said in the article I read on this was that you know, her secret is she just doesn't let anyone affect her. She's never stressed. And I do think stress really ages you. And you really see this with politicians. Because, I mean, like, being a prime minister is one of the most stressful jobs. If you look at a picture of a prime minister before and after their term, you can see that's really aged them. So I wouldn't be prime minister because it would take years off my life.
What's weird about this, when you can go mad kind of crunching the numbers on this. So she would have been a 60-year-old when the Beatles turned up. So she'd have been one of the people going, what is this newfangled young music? Then she was in an era, several eras, with which you can't quite comprehend anyone alive today could have known all of that. And do you know what she's celebrating this year as well? She's climbing Mount Everest and is going to parascend down afterwards. So she's staying. I did make that bit up, but she's. I was
going to say, I have a small feeling that might be fake news.
She's staying. Yeah, she's staying active. You're absolutely right. When you hear her speak, I mean, she sounds great. And she said, "I've had a lovely life. I've been all over the world, and now I live in a great place where people seem to look after me day and night." How wonderful, Chloe! Thank you for that. Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. Thank you to her. Over to you. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to a couple of guests on this issue of what is happening with, I suppose, insulating your home, solar panels, windmills, EV car, heat pump, cavity wall. That's years old, cavity wall, though, isn't it? A lot of comments, by the way, on solar panels. The name escaped me there for a second. One here from Ian in Hemel Hempstead, proving that I wasn't imagining. He said, these solar panels, they're going to work so well when Mad Ed sprays chemicals and tones down the sun. I remember a house on my dad's milk round in the early 70s that had solar panels on the roof. So there you go. I wasn't imagining that these things have been around forever. And Sean in Norfolk says Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House roof in the 1970s. So it's a long time that they've been a thing. Did anyone switch them on, I wonder? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Paul says, I wouldn't install any alternative energy unless the saving was at least 5% of the installation cost. And that's really what it's down to, isn't it, when it comes to that? We know that Downing Street, by the way, refusing yesterday to confirm whether Energy Secretary Ed Miliband will remain in his role. Labour faces a lot of internal clashes over the net zero policy. Tony Blair, of course, intervened. We know that Unite, the union, seem very unhappy about what's going to happen with jobs in this sphere. It comes on the same day they also announced that house builders will be required to install solar panels on all new homes by 2027. As part of the scheme, it's claimed that homeowners could recover installation costs within 4 years, saving over £1,000 annually. Let's speak with Jim Dale, meteorologist and author, and Chris Morrison, environment editor at the Daily Sceptic. Chris, firstly, look, all very well. Who doesn't want to save money? If it saves money, all well and good. But do we need to do it? There's the question. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Solar panels, well, probably the silliest idea that the Green Lobby has had so far, particularly in Britain. The World Bank did a survey about 4 years ago, and they found out of 242 countries, I think, where they looked at how viable solar panels were, Britain was 241st. It's completely crazy. We had whole periods in the winter where the sun doesn't shine; it only shines for a short time, and so we have all this. We have also. I was listening to you earlier, obviously, when I was going to come on, and I heard you had Dale Vince on. And I think the question to ask Dale in this day, where we are intruding on private grief, the decline of net zero, but the question to ask Dale, who incidentally has taken £110 million of subsidies in the last 20 years from the British taxpayer for his onshore windmills, is how many bats have you killed today, Vince? Or rather, how many of your wind turbines have?
He says he doesn't take any subsidies at all and never has done.
No. I
I know, I appreciate he's not here at the moment.
But... No, I think he says he doesn't take dividends. he doesn't say dividends, but the subsidies, of course, the subsidies available to all windshore operators, the ones that we pay £15 billion a year for every single year on our bills.
All right. Let me just put that first point, though, about solar panels to Jim Dale. Afternoon to you, Jim.
Good afternoon.
One of the greatest wastes of money, don't do anything, net zero. We're mourning the end of it. These are the words of Chris, our other guest here. Your response?
No, this is the words of the right and the far right, to be honest with you, the fossil fuelers of this world who've been around trying to knock it till kingdom come, to be honest with you. Look, solar panels have not arrived yesterday. They've been here for some time now. They'll continue to aggregate across the country. That's without a shadow of a doubt. It's going in the right direction. I think you've got to ask those people who've got solar panels and they're working and they're actually paying money back to the grid. In other words, that they're actually being paid for their production. So this silliness about being held ransom to the likes of Putin with gas and oil is silliness. And I know why Chris is saying what he's saying, because he's represented by oil companies, fuel companies, and the innuendo he puts out about Dale Vince, obviously it's a script he came on with. It's bogus. It's just absolutely bogus, and he shouldn't be allowed to get away with things like this. Let's be clear. On a day like today, we're going to break the May the 1st record. Okay, it's just about there now, and it will break it. This is after record after record after record. The reason net zero is in place, one of the reasons why we're moving to solar power and wind power is simply because the climate is going in the wrong direction. And although 27 degrees might be nice for a lot of people out there, and I'm not knocking it, our 27 degrees, 28 degrees, 29 degrees is somebody else's 49 degrees down the road. Make that absolutely clear, and people die in that. Chris misses it because his eyes are on a big oil pot and the money that's behind it. I don't. I'm a meteorologist. I see the data. The data isn't screwed.
Okay.
That's why we need to go forward with this.
Well, there you are, Chris. I mean, you're essentially just in bed with the oil companies, according to Jim. That's what it's all about, and that's the angle you speak from. So you're not a credible witness.
Well, I would warn Jim to be very careful of putting out allegations like that. It's caused people like Chris Packham a lot of trouble in the past. I don't take a penny from hydrocarbon interests, and I resent the fact...
You didn't say it was personal, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
My words, please.
Right. You were just talking about far-right people.
In a personal
and if you could not interrupt, I didn't interrupt you, so if not interrupt. The fact is that Jim talks about, he's a great one for pointing out the window and saying, "Oh, it's hot today. The world is collapsing." What we have seen, of course, and please don't interrupt. I didn't interrupt you. What we see, of course, is that we see that there is no climate collapse, that we're intruding on private grief here because net zero is collapsing, partly because the science behind it is undermined. There is no climate crisis. The IPC doesn't say there's a climate crisis. The IPC says quite clearly in its assessment reports, if you read them, that extreme weather has not increased in the last 100 years and that humans have got nothing to do with it. Jim often comes on these programs and talks about the wildfires in America. A paper written recently showed that wildfires in America were a quarter of the last 100 years that they were in the historical record going back to 1600. So all of these scares have been whipped up. All of these scares have been whipped up in order to produce a sort of net zero catastrophe, which is proving, as the events in Spain showed, is a catastrophe. It's got nothing to do with Nazi and being
Jim. On that point that Chris raises about inclemency in the weather and extreme weather conditions, whether you want to talk about smog in the 1950s in London, horrendous fires and hurricanes in the States in the last century and the century before that. I mean, he's got a point there, isn't he? There's a lot of data to show. We've always had terrible weather in different parts occasionally.
When Chris talks about there's no science behind it, the people that I respect are not the people on oil platforms. There are people in NASA and NOAA, in the WMO, in the Hadley Centre in the UK. And by the way, in the UK, never mind the US, in the UK, we are already at the highest point in terms of wildfires that we've seen ever. Now, you might not think it's not passed very easily in the news and not registered very much, but to be honest with you, that's exactly where we are. And we're in mid-spring. We're not even halfway through the year yet. So look, the evidence for climate change is, unless you've been living under a stone or unless you're in bed with the oil companies, you've got to be living in cloud cuckoo land not to know that what is going on across the world, all the charts, all the graphs show this and show it so as plain as day. And that's why the stuff that Chris has come out with, and other people on his spectrum, it is exactly that. You really have to be a lot stupid to actually not recognise what's going on.
Well, I'll come back to Chris in just a second on the perhaps the allegation of stupidity. But the wider point on all of this, Jim, is that in the last 24 hours, we've had Unite the Union not happy with net zero. We've got Tony Blair, a Labour man through and through, not happy with the direction of travel. And the Norwegians telling us you'd have to be a lunatic to ignore the North Sea. They said it's a clear area where we can make our country more profitable, offer better services. We're not going to put a cork in the pipeline like the United Kingdom are. What do the Norwegians know that we don't know?
I'll tell you what they know. They know they get 50% of their revenue from oil and gas from the UK. That's what they're scared of. But at the same time, let's make it absolutely clear where Norway is in terms of renewables. Okay, 90% of Norway is run by renewables, and the biggest energy operator in Norway is Equinor. You can look it up, it's there. And if you look up on their site and what they say, they are for evolution, not revolution. We're not going to get rid of oil and gas tomorrow. I'm a realist. That's not going to happen, okay? And we know that, and Ed Miliband knows that. Okay. This is a situation where we swap one for the other over a period of a decade or two, and that's the direction of travel. And in fact,
but Ed Miliband doesn't seem to be keen on that, though, does he? Running things in parallel to see how it goes. Mr. Miliband is all for sticking concrete down shafts and blocking up pipes.
Sorry, I missed who you said it was there.
Mr. Miliband. He's the Energy Secretary.
No, Mr. Miliband's going in the right direction. I think there's a lot of quotes from him, particularly from the right-wing press. Most of these stories that you quoted come from the Mail. They come from the Telegraph. They're well known for being where Chris is, essentially.
Well, maybe they're just the organisations that choose to publish it, where others maybe choose to ignore it, if you look at it that way.
No, they choose to make it up as they go along.
All right, well, Chris, what do you say to that? Norway apparently get a lot of their stuff, 50% of their oil from the UK. I must admit, I didn't know that. Stand to be corrected. And they're reliant mostly anyway on renewables, so, you know, they're just being sensible about it.
Yes, I mean, they have a wealth fund of about £1.3 trillion, much of which we contributed to, and they can virtue signal all they like because they're still opening their gas spigots to people in this country who stopped it. What is happening here is well, Jim knows this, is crazy. First of all, we've seen the experience in Spain in the last few days. Wind and solar are the wrong sort of power to put into a modern industrial grid. They cause problems with the frequency. They come in and out. They cause enormous problems. And this is what we've seen in Spain. It's been covered up in the mainstream media, right wing and left wing. Jim always seems to find any media is based on political terms. It's been sort of come off the headlines because this was the inevitable result of putting wind and solar, unstable, unreliable renewables into the grid. Now,
Chris, you know that's unfounded. You know that's unfounded.
Excuse me, Jim. I'd never interrupt you if I could. I know you want to jail me, by the way. I mean, I'm surprised that we're having this convivial chat in Ian's studio here.
Yeah, I think climate change
record remember last year is wanting to jail.
You think Chris should be in jail, Jim?
No, I think it's not the way it works. Make it absolutely clear. I mean, I'm very much in favour, as Dale Vince is in favour, and others in favour of making climate denial for the reason of the danger to not just our nation but every nation. The children, the grandchildren are growing up. These people are going to be in trouble in the future. So my view is that in law, when it goes through Parliament, if it ever gets through Parliament, probably will not in this Parliament, but whatever, the climate denial of the likes of what Chris is advocating should become illegal, and therefore, I'm not saying jail necessarily, but fines or whatever. That's in the pipeline. That will happen at some point when the climate crunch occurs, in terms of a widespread crunch rather than just here and there as it is at the moment.
Well, when you say a crunch, do you mean like a big event that once and for all settles it? Is that,
it's going to take exactly that for that to, and that's more than, say, 50,000 people dying in Europe during 2022 heat wave. for example.
All right.
It's going to take more than that, but it's coming.
Chris, just before they cuff you and take you away to Parkhurst, can we just get a word on Jim's point there, that there is an event, something seismic's going to happen where the likes of you, Chris, and others will have to go, do you know what, I hold my hands up, Governor, I got this completely wrong, this place is falling apart.
Well, we've had these tipping points for the last 20 years and none of them have occurred. And so we have the Arctic sea ice growing back since certainly in the last 10 years and has been on a pause for 20 years. More polar bears than you can shake a stick at. Antarctica ice, the temperature hasn't warmed there for 70 years. More coral in record amounts on the Great Barrier Reef, as I talked about the wildfires. So when Jim wants to put me in jail, or whatever he wants to do, and says that people will be coming after me in the next few years, I ask him, what am I denying? I look at the data. I look at the extreme weather data. I look at all of the indices. I look at even what the IPC has written. And there is not a scintilla of proof for anything that people like Mr. Dale say. There is no climate emergency.
What's the deal? You're both looking at the same data here, aren't you, surely?
No,
but extrapolating different answers. Jim?
Ian, Chris is not looking at the same data. This is the whole point. He's looking at made-up stuff. He's looking at old stuff that gets regurgitated every so often and pushed out. I hear it all the time. And to be honest with you, most of it comes out of America. Most of it comes out of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which is a network of almost underground, let's just say, not factual information that gets put out on social media that Chris picks up. That's what he's reading, okay? And look with your own eyes. Look with your own eyes at what's going on. Even today, to a certain degree, I'm not saying you can't get one-off heat waves. You can, of course you can. But the combination of what we are seeing, without a shadow of a doubt, backed up by the likes of NASA, who send people to the moon and Mars and the rest of it.
All
Never
right.
mind these bits of scribbled paper on the desk. That's
Jim, just a final point. Chris, you're gathering your information from old sources, essentially, is what Jim is saying. Speak to the boys and girls at NASA and they'll put you right.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the IPCC. I don't know what data Jim is looking at. He can say that's scribbled under the table and supported by fossil fuel and all the other nonsense that he comes up with. I'll give you one final thing. Professor Richard Lindzen, emeritus professor at Harvard, a brilliant man, a brilliant atmospheric professor, who said that we will look back on the late 20th century, the first part of the 21st century, and we will look at climate. This whole thing to do with climate will be one of the greatest scientific frauds that we've ever seen. Another 2022 man who won the Nobel Physics Prize, a giant of modern science, Dr. John Clauser, says that the whole narrative that Jim expresses is a crock of crap. So when he says that I'm just looking at some sort of underground, conspiracy theory, I'm not.
All right. OK. Listen, we could go on for much longer. Jim, thank you for your time. Jim Dale, meteorologist, and author. Chris Morrison, environment editor at the Daily Skeptic. Thank you to both of them. We will speak Dale Vince as well in a couple of moments, because a lot was said and his name was raised during that too. Over to you as well. 0344 499 1000.
And I think he probably wants to sort of give not necessarily an update, but just give an indication of thanks to the people that supported him.
You know what I think of the monarchy. It just worries me.
Yeah, but he's living with cancer. That was an expression that was used not necessarily to him, but he's talking about people living with it, and you can do so. But to do that, you've got to live with that chemotherapy, and which is incredibly draining. It effectively is poisoning your system.
Yep.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There's a lot to tuck into. I'll tell you what, let's immediately speak with Dale Vince, founder of Ecotricity. Dale has long campaigned in this area. Now senses, I don't think I'm misquoting you here, Dale, now senses a corner has been turned, but several spanners are in the works, Dale. Tony Blair has reared his head. Unite the Union. Even the Norwegians are piling into this. Some are saying net zero is dead.
I think it's madness, actually. Tony Blair came out this week and he said irrational things while calling the whole net zero move an irrational thing itself. He said we need less green energy, which prevents carbon emissions, and instead should invest more in carbon capture, which is about cleaning up after the event. It's incredibly expensive, doesn't exist anywhere in the world at scale. And that doesn't make any sense to me. It's always cheaper to do prevention rather than cure. And he went on to say we need big nuclear power. That takes 30 years. We need small nukes. There are none in the world. I mean, Tony Blair, I don't know what he's been smoking, but it was a very unhelpful intervention. Unite, I just read the piece from the leader of Unite, and she says, Grangemouth shutting down is an example of why of net zero doing harm. It was shut down by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire tax isle owner, because it was uneconomic to him. He couldn't make money from it. It had nothing to do with net zero. It's a fossil fuel project. She blamed it on Ed Miliband. So, right now, net zero is getting blamed for everything. The blackouts in Spain and Portugal, net zero gets the blame for that as well. Nobody knows what happened, but it gets pinned on net zero. What are you going to do?
We had a previous guest, Dale, and it's worth clearing this one up because it does come up from time to time. I know whether it's a podcast, whether it's TV, radio, whatever, there's always somebody that says, what about the subsidies, Dale? The reason you have this view is because of all of the subsidies you've been given over the years. A previous guest, I can't remember the specific figure, it was something like 130 million, he said, you've received in subsidies. Yeah. True or false?
False. What's happened is he's looked at our accounts, and in our accounts it identifies the sum of money the government paid to reduce everybody's energy bills during the energy crisis. I forget the exact name for it, but every home in the country got this knocked off their bill, and it was paid through energy companies. Like VAT goes backwards and forwards through companies to the government. And it was simply that, and he called that a subsidy, but it wasn't, because all of that money went to our customers, as it did to every other person in the land. So that's just bonkers. Subsidies we've had in, this always comes up, I say net zero. That's the amount of subsidies that we've had.
In terms of today, it's May the 1st, of course. It's the hottest May on record. Now, as a man that campaigns in this area, because we do get weather that's not always typical. That can happen any time, regardless of events. Do you, when it's this sunny and this warm in May, do you wake up feeling morose and thinking, I can't get out of bed because, it's further evidence the planet is dying? Or do you just stick your trunks on and go for a dip?
I actually, somewhere in the middle, right? I'm not putting on my trunks and swimming, but I'm not actually either obsessed about climate change either. I'm just like, oh yeah, it's a hot day. But if you look at the statistics, we're breaking record after record, not just for heat, but also for rain and for flooding and for wildfires. Just look at the history of the last 5 years. The weather is becoming increasingly volatile and extreme. That's a fact. And it's quite likely when they get to the bottom of the blackouts in Spain and Portugal, it will be an extreme weather event. All of the blackouts across Europe in the last 5 years have been extreme weather events. It's ironic, not net zero, but actually the climate crisis, which is what net zero is here to beat.
Obvious question then on the back of that, and we talked about this yesterday, if you look at the initiatives we have in the last 20 years, everything from electric cars, the way we construct homes, insulation, the less meat that we currently eat. I mean, the list we ride bikes in places that people who've never even heard of a bike ride. There's a massive list of how we function today, unrecognisable from 20 years ago. How is it getting worse?
Well, emissions are getting worse. They simply are. The amount of carbon in the atmosphere has been measured now for decades, and it's never been higher in some hundreds of thousands of years. It's very clear. The climate data is very clear. It's about carbon in the atmosphere. It's still increasing. And of course, countries like China and India are still burning massive amounts of fossil fuels, and the United States actually still burning massive amounts of fossil fuels. So despite the personal changes we all make, the bigger picture is getting worse. But the rate of increase in emissions is slowing down. The world is moving towards a place where we reach peak emissions and then we get down the other side to net zero. It's coming.
In terms of the things we do, today the government talked about every new house is going to have solar panels on it by 2027. You support that?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Look, 10 years ago, this was a new building regulation that Cameron squashed. He had this moment, you probably remember. He said he was going to cut the green crap. He did all kinds of things. And there was a new building standard that said all new homes would have solar panels. It would save them a few £100 a year off their energy bills. As a result, in the intervening, the 10 years since then, for those new homes, £15 billion extra has been paid on their energy bills because he did that. So Labour doing this is super important, not just for the 100,000 homes a year that the Tories built, but for the several 100,000 a year that Labour plans to build. The 1.5 million by 2030, these homes will have much lower energy bills as a result. It's super important.
And 20 seconds if you can, Dale. I know you've got a mixed relationship with heat pumps. You don't think they're the future, which might surprise some people.
Yeah, I think the idea of compulsion in heat pumps, I think, is wrong. But the idea of heat pumps as a national program is wrong. Too expensive, increase your bills. I mean, there's not that much right with them. They won't work in every home. We've got better options.
There it is. Dale, we will speak again soon. He is Dale Vince, founder of Eco-Tricity, long-term campaigner in that respect. The last point he raised there might surprise you. Thoughts on what he had to say, 0344 499 1000. And our previous guest, it was an interesting Tate-a-Tate with Jim Dale and Chris Morrison there. I don't know which side you fell out on. And in terms of you, have you held your nose and embraced green revolution? Have you got solar panels, a windmill, a heat pump? Thoughts on that? Lines are open. More coming up after the news.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, you better believe it. Lots to get through here this afternoon. We'll go to some calls shortly. Downing Street refusing to confirm, this was really interesting, refusing to confirm if Energy Secretary Ed Miliband will stay in his role. I mean, there's a turn up for the books when Downing Street cannot say an unequivocal yes. This comes as Labour clashes continue over net zero on the day that it's announced that house builders must install solar panels on new homes by 2027. We'll have more on that from you shortly. Also, Rachel Reeves under investigation by Parliamentary Standards Watchdog for not declaring a free £276 Christmas theatre ticket. How many theatre shows can this woman go to, for God's sake? Is she even running the economy? She's forever at the O2 or the Palladium or somewhere else. Loves a lovely seat in the stalls and an ice cream. There's our Rach. More on that too. And a new national campaign, Copped Enough, has been launched by the Police Federation to highlight what it's described as a crisis in UK policing that is endangering officers' lives and putting public safety at risk. We'll talk to the acting chair of the Police Federation shortly on that. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Tracy says, how can you let that net zero call how can you let the net zero call us normal folks right and far right? Shall I start that whole thing again? This could be Tracy's fault, could be mine. How can you let the net zero call us normal folk right and far right? I think the net zero guest, I think it is. I'm sick of being called that just because I don't drink their Kool-Aid. That is a very good point, Tracy. Thank you for that. Simon says, at the end of that montage on Smash the Gangs, you should add, and free sausages. Hostages. Yeah, hostage, that one. We could do. We did think about that. And this is an interesting one from John in Teesside. He says, I had a new solar panel system fitted in January, 6.5 kilowatt hour system. I think that's what KWH stands for, kilowatt hour system with 21 kilowatt batteries. Installation cost £19,000. In April, I netted 53 quid profit from my system due to exporting back to the grid. My last three bills before solo were 200 quid for a four-bedroom house, so £253 profit in the spring months. Will take 10 years to achieve break, even so saving the planet rather than saving money. Yeah, I mean, is it down to the cash? Is it down to the environment? One here says, I wouldn't install any alternative energy unless the savings was at least 5% on the installation cost. And let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Oscar Redrop back with us, former number 10 advisor. Afternoon to you, Oscar.
Afternoon, Ian. How are we?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Good to have you with us. I mean, let's start then with what's happening in the Labour Party. They seem to be having an almighty row over there. And what makes this sort of slightly delicious, frankly, they're mostly having a row with themselves. It seems it's quite an internal thing. You've got Blair falling out with the government. You've got Unite falling out with the government. You've got the Norwegians falling out with the government over oil. Goodness me. I mean, it's a perfect recipe for some great broadcasting, some great debate on this. But it all, of course, falls on the backdrop of net zero. That's what it's all about. Latest announcement today, house builders will be mandated by law to install solar panels on the roofs of new properties. We'll come to the details of that in just a second. But this does seem to be, I would suggest, doing nothing for Ed Miliband's stability in government. I would imagine Keir Starmer's painfully aware of that. And sort of diluting by the hour the evangelistic approach to this whole net zero experiment.
Yeah, net zero in the eyes of the majority of voters is done. It's been over for quite some time. I think kind of green initiative policy chasing. I think you could go back to the local elections. Maybe there was a by-election, I think, in Uxbridge around ULEZ.
Yes, there was, yeah, where the Tories narrowly won.
Yeah, and that really, I think, was the first spark and the first time, the political class realised that actually the general public have too much to worry about. They are digging into their pockets. They are battling to survive. And, things like net zero just seem impossible, unimportant, and hard to reach, impossible to reach. And Ed Miliband has been the fall guy on this. And he's been a magnet for criticism for quite some time, predominantly, publicly at least, from the right. But I have to say, the timing of the intervention from Blair was completely fascinating to me.
Wasn't it?
I mean, it kind of showed in many ways why Blair, like him or loathe him, is one of the greatest political operators that we have had. And, when we think about the timing before the locals, it's really, really fascinating because they can't move on it and they can't act on it now. But afterwards, the fallout of what will be a very, very difficult, very, very difficult day, most likely. And you think about that background that Blair and Ed have when Ed was an advisor to Brown. And I think Ed was probably doing a lot of the...
Oh, yes. He had a big old spoon that he carried around with him and he stirred it whenever he could.
Absolutely. So Blair would have enjoyed that intervention like nothing else. And Ed is gone. There's just no way. I mean, in fairness to Ed, he's an experienced politician. He probably knows that at this point. Yeah. And moreover, he probably, it's probably too late, but he probably should have walked out by his own, with autonomy, and he should have walked out a while ago because he's been, as you rightly hinted at, he's been undermined now gradually for weeks and weeks.
Well, you would have thought if he wanted to retain full credibility, if that is the right word, it's not a word I normally put in the same sentence as Ed Miliband, but you take the point, he would have... You'd only have walked the plank when the Heathrow expansion was announced. I mean, if anything would go completely against what the man is meant to stand for, it would be that. That one policy alone would have been enough to go, no, sorry. And then he came up with some old guff about planting some trees in Cleethorpes to sort of offset it, as if that was going to work. But he's hung on, and then there was the Luton expansion, and then, some sort of positive news about oil fields, perhaps. I would find it hard to believe he's going to be in that position this time next year, and possibly not even this time next month.
No, absolutely right. And look, I mean, it's a tough brief because, as I said, the mood music around things like net zero has completely changed. And I think Reform have really, really done a very, very smart job on that. They've completely tapped into people's contempt for it. It's a middle class privilege kind of plaything. Yeah. And alongside issues like immigration, there's nothing more angering to voters when they see Ed Miliband. And he is the focal point. He is the guy on TV talking about it every 5 minutes. And there's nothing more angering to people who are literally struggling to put food on the table and to keep themselves warm during winter than to see the political class of politicians kind of wanging on about something that is intangible and we have to be honest at this point, unachievable. Yeah. And so Ed is going to take the full brunt of that. But I really think Starmer would have got on the phone to Blair at some point on this. I really do. And I'd love to have been a fly on the wall.
Well, yesterday I had a theory that, this was all kind of nicely scripted, that Keir had said to Tony, look, come on, if you can make a bit of an announcement and do me a right old favour. I thought I was the only person that came up with that idea. Then apparently yesterday lots of people simultaneously did have that theory. It's a little bit tinfoil hat, but, this is Westminster and government. You know how it works over there, Oscar. Anything like that could happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, Blair is someone who is not afraid to intervene. And I think he picked his timing for this. Of course he did. I mean, and it's not tin hat stuff. Someone like Tony Blair doesn't just chuck things out at random. It is meticulous, and it was meant to damage, and that damage has absolutely been caused.
Yeah, 100%. Let's move to another member of the cabinet, Rachel Reeves. I said at the beginning, Oscar, Rachel Reeves is in a theatre more often than Andrew Lloyd Webber. I don't know what is she ever in the Treasury, for goodness sake? She's always there in the front row watching something or other. And this time it's tickets for a Christmas theatre trip where she's under investigation for the late registration of those tickets. They were declared to the Treasury but missed the deadline. She self-reported the error and is expected to apologise under the rectification process. It doesn't say, unless you have the information. I want to know what it was she went to see, because I always think that's rather interesting. Because when we had that moment in the summer where who was the artist that they all went to see at Wembley? It was
Taylor Swift.
It was Taylor Swift, yeah. I just don't believe that many cabinet ministers. Half of them have probably never heard of Taylor Swift, for God's sake. And that many wanted to sit through a show, which by all accounts was very, very long. My other half went to see. But Rachel's all over the place in Theatreland. She'll be winning an award at some point soon. But being late to declare it, look, she's got her handlers around her that are meant to do that stuff, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure. But this is the point that, again, a lot of politicians completely miss, and Labour are missing time and time again, is that the public don't care if you declare it properly and you declare it on time or whatever. Again, that's not really the story here. They care that you're spending all this time going out and about. I mean, going to the O2 to watch Taylor Swift, going to the West End to watch theatre productions.
Yeah.
I get that politicians are human beings. I completely understand that, and they're not always treated that way. And that's not right, and it's not fair. But politics isn't right and fair sometimes, and particularly when things are going so south and so badly with the economy, and people's lives are so hamstrung and so difficult. They're meant to be representing families that would, like, the idea of spending 300 quid to go to a West End show for the weekend or whatever, it's just not even, that's dreamland. They're scrapping to find 300 quid to feed their kids. I mean, I'm not, that is just the reality. So that's what politicians don't understand. It's the fact you're going. And
100%. And also, Oscar, sorry to interject, but and the reason when we found out that Lord Ali was buying Keir Starmer a suit every day and spectacles and God knows what else, it wasn't that no laws were broken in doing that. And it's fine if a Labour donor wants to give the potential Prime Minister a nice suit. I couldn't care about that. The bit that wasn't fine was that this was meant to be the party that didn't do stuff like that. In fact, they argued we didn't even know people like Lord. We don't know millionaires. That lot, the Blues, they know all the millionaires. We don't know people like that. We just know, people who represent unions and ordinary folk. And then we discover that, they'd been off to his mansion in Kent, and I think Rayner had gone off to Manhattan a couple of times, lording it up on the rooftop, overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, enjoying nice freebie weekend. Supposedly, this was the party that just didn't go there, but it turns out they do. And Rachel Reeves in particular, because she can't get out the stalls. And I'm not referring to the loos.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that you have to bear in mind, as well as that, the slight hypocrisy issue, Tories this, Tories that. But again, it's the timing thing. If you think about a Labour government, they've been out of power for 14, 15 years. It's like starting a brand new job and turning up late every day in your first few weeks. Like, all that sleaze scandal with the freebies was in the summer. It was right after they'd been elected.
Yeah.
And for that to have come out at that, first few months of Labour power was really caused a bad smell. And yes, there is the 24-hour news cycle, and politics moves so fast these days. It drops off, but then a little reminder like this, of just that pattern of behaviour, it's really simple, obvious stuff. And for Rachel Reeves to claim that I declared it all properly, I just did it a bit late, completely misses the point.
Yeah, you would have thought that somewhere, around the election time, that Starmer himself would have said to everybody, Oscar, in that department, right, you don't take any freebies, even if it's a flipping cornetto from somebody in the pub. You don't take anything at all. Not a thing. No trips, nothing whatsoever. We're going to be squeaky clean. But you know what? They couldn't quite resist it seems. I think there's nothing a lefty likes more than a freebie.
No, spot on. And, like I said, what really, really sticks in people's throats, I think, is that, and again, it sounds unfair, but it is just the reality. And I remember it was Starmer, and he was saying, I'm still going to go to the football and this, that, and the other. And really, and again, this sounds a bit over the top, but I mean, just watch it on TV. Listen, are you not working? I mean, this is it is being Prime Minister and Chancellor. There is no other job like it, and unfortunately, and it kills you and it breaks you emotionally, physically. We see what it does, but that's the price you pay to lead this country. You don't get that kind of time off to yourself to have a little freebie day trip 100%. Or whatever. It just doesn't work like that. And if you don't like it, if you're not prepared to do it, then someone else should do the job.
Yeah, I've spoken to loads of MPs over the years, and I'm sure you have too, Oscar, that don't want the job. Many of them, have huge aspirations for front bench positions, but there's many more that just simply wouldn't go there because they've worked. They know all the people very well. They're qualified to do it, but wouldn't touch it in a month of Sundays often for the very reasons that you've outlined. And you know what it's like. A good diligent MP, just a backbencher, works crazy hours, the good ones. It's relentless, 7 days a week, 24. You're never off, never ever off. You cut more cake and ribbons than anything you could shake a stick at every weekend. At Christmas, you've got to eat 17 Christmas meals at the old folks' home every single day of the week for about 3 weeks. These kind of it's a job that requires dedication. So lording it up in £7,000 worth of suit at the National Theatre is a very, very bad look. Which brings us to another story here, because I suppose you could say this goes against type in many respects. Labour resisting NHS pay rise demands despite the threat of strike action. Now, of course, they have previously dished out some pay rises, which I think I'm right in saying were probably baked into that £22 billion black hole, which is a curious way of coming by that number, but nonetheless, that's what parties do. Now they're saying, actually, this independent review body's 3% pay rise recommendation kind of not on our watch, which could mean strikes under the socialists.
Yeah, shock. And the thing that's really, really difficult with the negotiations, and that Labour, I think, leapt far too quickly on. And I get, Wes, I think specifically, let's talk about the NHS. Wes wanted to show, look, the Tories couldn't handle this. I'm going to sort it out. Let's just give them what they want now. Let's just freeze it as an issue for the time being. Then I can go on TV and I can say, look, we're getting to work. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here, people. All sorted. But the problem is, you give a little bit, and then it's very hard to turn around the next time when inevitably it's not enough.
Yeah.
And I'm not debating the rights and wrongs of that. There are people obviously who work in our NHS just so incredibly hard, and in some ways you could never pay them enough. But they will keep, and we'll see this in different sectors, and they will keep coming back because they think Labour will play ball with it. And so Labour having to pull up the drawbridge this time will, in some ways, I think, if they continue to do so, can kind of instigate more fury. Because once you give and then you take away, I think that sometimes inflames things even more, whereas the Tories were pretty strong on it. And it's a no. Yeah. And we might be able to move a few pieces here and there. And in a way that there's a predictability to that. So I think they've got themselves into a right old pickle with this. And Wes has got some really, really big reform plans for the NHS. And I think NHS England, I think that was a good move. It's something the Tories should have done a long time ago. But he's not going to have a lot of fans in that place, I don't think, anymore. And this is going to make that job harder. And ultimately, if you're this great reformer who's going to come in and make things better, both for the user and for people in the NHS, you have to deliver. And I think that early start he made was too quick off the draw. He didn't think, it wasn't strategic. And they've got a long old time before the next election. And I think those industrial relationships are going to get really, really sour in the Labour Party.
Yeah, 100%. And if the likes of Ed Miliband start getting kicked out of the cabinet, then they'll probably sour at a greater rate as well. Listen, lovely to have you with us as ever, Oscar. Thank you for your time. Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor with us on the programme. He really does know his way around how that whole system works. At number 10 for years, the whole Westminster scene and how it functions, where the bodies are buried, to put it another way. Over to you, 0345 04449911000. Don't go away. Glenn, Rachel, Nick, Tina, Kelly, David, Martin and others. Loads of calls, comments on that question we put out at the beginning. Have you held your nose and embraced the green revolution, even if you haven't done it for sort of Chris Packham-like reasons? You did it because you wanted to save a few quid. Your car, EV, heat pumps, solar panels. Have you got it? Can we speak to someone who's got a windmill in their own back garden? Just a single windmill. Apparently they do make domestic ones, which are still, I'm told, sizable still, but not the kind of thing you might find on the South Downs, if you know what I'm saying. Lines are open. This is Talk.
And I think he probably wants to sort of give not necessarily an update, but just give an indication of thanks to the people that supported him.
You know what I think of the monarchy. It just worries me.
Yeah, but he's living with cancer. That was an expression that was used not necessarily to him, but he's talking about people living with it, and you can do so. But, to do that, you've got to live with that chemotherapy, and which is incredibly draining. It's, effectively is poisoning your system.
Yep.
Whenever the Blair creature comes out and says something that I agree with, then it worries me very, very much indeed. Where have I gone wrong? I rush out and go and put sun cream on the cat to calm my nerves. But it is very odd. I don't know. I think there must be people. And long ago, the late Nigel Lawson said to the global warming people, look, you may be right, you may be wrong, but your approach of actually trying to strangle the economy to prevent this from happening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes from Ben in Derbyshire. He says, we have 2 solar systems in our house, an old one taking advantage of the old feed-in tariff, so we get paid for what we produce, and the new one that produces so much more with batteries that charge up throughout the day and run the house through the night. So energy is free for a lot of the year, plus an electric car, so free fuel there as well. We had to buy a hot tub to mop up the excess energy. The green agenda played no part. It's simply because I want to save some money. Best decision we ever made. Ben, nice one. I think that is probably the way In fact, if they'd have been selling it in that respect, it's a bit like recycling. You know, we recycled milk bottles for years and nobody ever... In fact, the word recycling didn't exist. My nan would never have said, don't forget to recycle the milk. She'd have said, just put the milk bottles out. It would have been preposterous to throw them away. It would have been almost criminal. So who throws a glass milk bottle away? It'd be crazy. But nobody thought of it in the sense that this is to save the polar bears. This was just about common sense. And that's the thing, it's the line between common sense and evangelism, which is where Ed Miliband is in one camp and I think the rest of us are in another one. Kelly is in Gloucestershire on this point. Kelly, what are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Hiya. Yeah, I just wanted to say we're just in the process of building a house at the moment. The kids, we're not quite in yet, but the kids have moved into the east wing and my mum's moved into the west wing.
Nice.
And we're not quite in the middle bit yet. But,
they're your own pet names, are they? Or are you really building a mansion?
We are building a mansion, yeah.
Nice.
We've gone furnace heating, which is like a gasification boiler. So we've gone and built our own wood barn with a 5-year stock rotation. So I've got a very special relationship with my chainsaw. And yeah, so we've gone that, but we've also got solar. So we've got solar on the roof for when the sun is shining. And then and then we'll sort of use the furnace in the winter more. It will take a wheelbarrow load of wood a day in the winter.
Is that bad though? Is that meant to be bad, Kelly, the wood stuff?
No, because it does two burns. So it burns the wood, but then it also, as a secondary burn, the gasification part of it burns the CO2 and other gases in the wood. So it does like two burns.
So this ain't your standard fire. This does stuff to address the criticism of wood burning.
Exactly, yeah, it's really good, and it's actually one of the best. It's probably the government's best kept secret at the moment.
No, I was going to say, I've got to ask you, what does a unit like that cost?
I think the furnace cost us about $2,500.
Okay.
And then obviously we're lucky because I live in the Forest of Dean and there's a lot of wood. But we did look into ground source heating because we're lucky enough to have a little bit of land and we've got our own mini digger.
Yeah.
So we was going to look into that. But when we did the maths, actually the electricity costs to run ground source heating made it more expensive. So these things, they look cheaper on paper, but when you actually work out the maths to run these things, they actually cost more. So
do they?
Yeah, like like these heat pumps. It's when you look at how much the electricity is to run these things, are you actually saving that much money?
Oh, I see. But we are getting a lot of people getting in touch though about solar panels. That if you can withstand the outlay of the solar panel, then it's a no-brainer in terms of your bills will be less.
Yeah, we've got solar as well, and we've got battery storage. And when you look at it, it is putting a little bit of money back into the grid. The only thing I don't really like is that you have to connect to the Wi-Fi and everything for it. So when they decide to cut the power off for whatever reason, all of a sudden the solar's not necessarily going to work properly.
Oh, you mean so you're white because everything will be through the solar?
Yeah, so although it's through the solar, if it can't connect to the Wi-Fi, it doesn't work properly. So if the electricity is cut, I'm still looking into this part of it because I don't understand it.
No, I can imagine, like so many things, it's Wi-Fi dependent. That's how
I can't get a straight answer out of anybody about how, if I'm off grid, does my solar still work?
Yeah.
With the setup that I've got, so trying to get a straight answer out if anyone is.
I'm sure. When is the mansion finished?
Ask my husband. He's building it. I was hoping to be in end of May. Now I'm like looking at Christmas. You know how it is. I was supposed to be in last Christmas.
Yeah, we got some friends at the end of the road. They're doing a similar thing. They lived in a caravan for the last year and a bit, and it's they're going. Yeah, it's definitely going to be Christmas. I'm sure they said that to us last Christmas, but you should have had Kevin MacLeod from Grand Designs down there with you. He'd have loved all this.
Do you know what? I wanted to, and I think he would have. Because it is great what we're doing.
Yeah.
But my husband was a little bit shy, so he didn't really want to. So
he could have been in silhouette, couldn't he? And you could have been doing all the talking, maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would have happened anyway.
Doesn't it everywhere? Listen, Kelly, lovely to hear from you. Good luck with everything. Thank you for that. Kelly in Gloucestershire, building their own place with all of those little considerations trunked into the equation. But she did say that overall, it's kind of like, you know, the outlay sort of overrides what you get back in that respect. But are you saving the planet? That's the point. One here says, if everyone had solar panels, it would not solve the problems around the instability of non-fossil power. Dale Vince doesn't like the thought of houses having solar panels as he will lose his business. Well, no, he endorsed the houses having solar. He doesn't like houses having heat pumps. That's because he thinks they're an inefficient way of doing things. This one from Chris. The government needs to make up their mind. On one hand, they're pushing for solar, new solar farms, panels on new houses. However, on the other hand, they are endorsing tests to spray to lower the power of the sun. Make up your mind. Two-tier Keir at his finest. There must be because I have made that very point myself, Chris. There's got to be a reason behind that, because of all things, they wouldn't be stupid enough to go, yeah, we're going to have less sun, because when you need more sun, there's got to be I don't think we had somebody on last week to try and explain the logic of it, but they weren't able to really explain the logic of it, which was a bit bizarre, but that's the way it goes. I'm sure there is I don't know whether it'll work or whatever it is. I'm not even sure what they're trying to do with this sun thing, this cloud thing. 0344 499 1000. More coming up from you next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 3. We'll go back to your calls in a few moments. Let's look at this story. The Police Federation have launched the Copped Enough campaign, warning of a crisis in UK policing that endangers officers and public safety. They're demanding fair pay, better protection and urgent mental health support for frontline officers. Shocking figures reveal officers are 21% worse off since 2010, with rising assaults, soaring mental health struggles across the force. And then, of course, just to throw in, you get stories, as we reported yesterday, that you get found not guilty in a court case, only for the IOPC to come knocking at your door going, we haven't finished with you, sunshine, come with us. Let's have another protracted case that probably lasts for years. All of that and more is what is happening to police officers on a daily basis. Let's speak to Tiff Lynch from the Police Federation. Good afternoon to you, Tiff.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Look, it's never been an easy job, and over recent years, you and I have talked many, many times on this, both here and on panels and the like. What is happening what has brought this to a head in order to launch the Copped Enough campaign? What's going on?
Yeah, this is something that we have talked about in previous interviews, and this is not something new. However, it's in the title. Police officers, our members, quite simply have copped enough. They go out there and they perform their roles every single day, 365 days a year, with very, very limited time away from the work, with their cancelled rest days and their annual leave. And what our officers are facing with the demands of the role, with a mass exodus of police officers, the mental and physical trauma, quite simply, they've had enough. And encompassing around that is the fair pay, it's the mental well-being, it's the physical well-being. But key is the mass exodus of these police officers and why.
And it's worrying, isn't it? Because, what it means is when we hear those figures of, there's been government says there's been a record amount of recruitment, it means you have a disproportionate amount of inexperienced officers. Thank goodness for those officers joining, but it just, the irredeemable reality is that you have this huge percentage of people who serve less than 3 or 4 years in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. 10,000 police officers looking to leave, a quarter of our workforce looking to leave in the next 2 years. And those figures come from our pay and morale survey that we conduct every year. That is a quarter of our workforce, 10,000 police officers, experienced police officers looking to leave, going into private industry or going overseas to other police forces. Western Australia are here actively poaching for our very, very highly skilled officers to go and work for them. We're becoming a training ground for Western Australia police. How is that right? The only people that really, really suffer are our officers, those young, inexperienced officers who need our experienced officers to learn their craft, to gain their confidence and move through, whether it be the ranks or different special departments.
Yeah.
It costs billions.
Who's listening? Ultimately, you need the Home Secretary to be on board with this. I've interviewed enough of these people in these positions over the years. They will always say, every single one of them will say, I am a big supporter of I have the police's back, the job is safe in my hands, don't you worry, you can rely on me. What kind of response now? We have a new government in situ. Is it feeling any different? Home Secretary, Policing Minister, what is that relationship like?
Every single Home Secretary that I've heard speak about policing whilst I've been in my career has always said, this is a job like no other, and we have your back and we support you and we are doing everything that we can for you. Are they listening to us? Are they hearing us? It's time for them to stand up and look after us. By looking after us, we are looking after the communities that we serve, but they do also.
And there's a lot, of course, of headlines about policing, and I always make the distinction, Tiff, when people talk about, you can't get a copper around when there's a shoplifting incident or my house was burgled. I mean, the mere idea there's a couple of cops sitting in a car around the corner going, nah, let's not bother with that one, mate. Of course that's not happening, but there is that perception. And it's not often cleared up by enough people to rectify that actually there are many, many reasons why the police are up against things. Often some weird and wacky rules come from above that officers find themselves having to enact. Issues around, I mentioned the Carver case a moment ago, where you've done your job exactly what you were paid and trained to do. You're taken to court, which was bad enough. Then you're identified, which was bad enough. And then you're found not guilty. Thank goodness, should never have to gone through it in the first place. And then after all of that, the IOPC, our friends at the IOPC, come along and go, we've not finished with you yet. I mean, there's those kind of areas of life where people think, is this job worth doing or staying with?
Absolutely. The constraints, the restrictions, the risks that our members take, like I say, each and every day, and that's whether they're on duty or off. We are 24/7 police officers. But without police officers on the street, without enough police officers on the street, you can't have safer communities. And with the void of our mass exodus of these officers, that void is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger unless you address these issues. And those issues being the mass exodus and the welfare and well-being of our members.
And in terms of where this goes next, I mean, do you, I don't want to be the purveyor of doom here, Tiff, but I mean, is there a sense that the whole story around policing at the moment could get worse before it gets better, or is this something that can be nipped in the bud with the right action?
Absolutely. Government needs to set out a plan of how they're going to rectify this. And we will be there, and we are more than willing to come around the table and support government and work with government to do this. It's not difficult. We need to be looking after our current police officers, stop the experienced officers walking out of the door, and pay our officers fairly for the risks and the dangerous job that they undertake.
Yeah.
By doing that, we can protect the communities.
It's really rather simple, isn't it, when you put it like that? I mean, it's not asking for much. It's a very simple kind of exchange of logic that needs to happen. And officers shouldn't be in a job where an already stressful job is made ever more stressful because of sort of external things that could relatively easily be put correct or put right.
Most definitely, most definitely. We need the public to get behind us so that we can get behind them.
A good way to finish, Tiff. Always great to have you on. Thank you. Tiff Lynch is the acting national chair of the Police Federation. Thank you to her. They want better pay and conditions. Often when you see these debates around policing, it's not just about money, it's conditions. Conditions are absolutely key to job satisfaction. And you don't want to be in a job that is that kind of challenging. I suppose the medical world, similarly, that on top of everything else you've got to deal with. I mean, you can only imagine the horrendous old scroach you've got to deal with on a daily basis as a copper. And that doesn't even get into the territory when you start dealing with the really unpleasant stuff, you know, about death, destruction, and God knows what else, all that goes with it. All of that it speaks for itself, right? It's not hard to understand. It's already tricky. The last thing you need is to think that the people that should have your back, i.e. governments, home secretaries, don't have your back. And if that creeps in too much, you just lose good officers. So I just can't work in this anymore. And the story yesterday of the officer who was found not guilty in the Carver shooting to discover they're going to be put through the mill again. I know there's something of a procedure about that, but in this particular case, for reasons I won't go over again, in that particular case, you'd have thought the IOPC would have gone, no, this is just going to look like vindictiveness. We're leaving this one alone. 0344 499 1000. Back to that issue of have you inadvertently accidentally embraced the green revolution? Solar panels, heat pumps, EV car. Are you on it? David in the Cotswolds says, I'm building my own home and did look at all this solar gubbings. The price of the solar can be absorbed into the cost of the roof build, but you end up having to use a heat pump and 80% of the power is used on that. It's easier and more cost effective to bury an LPG tank in the garden or use a furnace. Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Because if that is what you're attempting to do, the heat pump is not a hyper-efficient mode of generation. So there lies the problem, unless you've got a heat pump and swear by it. Nick is in Kent. Nick, what are you thinking? Afternoon to you.
Hi, afternoon, Ian. Nice to talk to you, matey.
You too.
I've got solar and batteries. Cut a long story short, when I retired and we moved out here to lovely Hove, to Kent, I bought an old house that needed a bit doing. One half of the house is more than 150 years old. The other half of it is fairly new. Of course, I had to do everything you normally do, new boiler, rewire the place, So I thought, well, I've got a bit of money in my pocket and come from London, let's go for it. So I solared the roof off. This was in 21. And a battery pack, and I've not paid an electricity bill since.
Wow.
With regard to the boiler, I've got a couple of heat pump guys in, and they both said to me, mate, you're wasting your time. Yeah. New part of the house, fine. Old part of the house, it'll never work.
Sure.
Not in a million years, don't bother with it. I'd love to have an electric car, but I can't afford to buy one. Spent all my money on the house.
But you could afford to run one, there's the irony.
I could afford to run one.
For nothing.
I'll get my energy from Octopus, and a couple of times a year I'll go and look at what my direct debit is set at, because I've got it set at the nominal £1, because I'm always in credit with them. And last time I checked it last week, it said, oh, we recommend your direct debit is minus £19.60 a month.
Wow.
So they're paying me back. I've only got 12 panels and a 6 kilowatt battery, and my installation cost was just a tad under 7,000 quid.
That's incredible.
And with regard to the new builds you were talking about, a big lump of my installation cost was putting a lot of scaffolding up around the house. Of course, if you're building a new house, scaffolding's up around it already. So
of course it is.
That's the big cost of your installation that's disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely. Hundreds a week, thousands maybe, depending on the size of the place. You're right. It's stuff like that. It is. I mean, I've spoken to people over the years. They've told exactly your kind of story, Nick. It's just that if you were in a position where you had some equity, I'm assuming, from the previous house, and you thought, I'll throw it into that, which makes sense. You don't notice that you paid for it in a curious way.
Not really. And the other silly little things that we did is I went around. I changed every single light bulb in the house to an LED.
Yep.
And I've never changed the light bulbs. I'm forever changing light bulbs in the old house, the old incandescent ones. The LED ones, never changed one in 4 years.
Wow.
And we insulated the loft up to 400 millimetres of insulation, and that made a great deal of difference upstairs, especially in the old part of the house, to just how warm the house stayed.
Have you got
So
goats
it can
and
be done,
chickens?
and it's not very expensive. The only thing about the insulation I would warn people about is I rang up lots of insulation companies, because laying loft insulation is a horrible job. It's nasty stuff.
Yeah.
I said, I want to buy this, I want to pay you to come and insulate my loft. And the first question I got was, well, what benefits are you on? I said, well, I'm not on any benefits. Oh, sorry, mate, it doesn't work like that. I said, well, I just want to buy it. No, mate, it doesn't work like that. You've got to be on benefits.
Seriously?
Seriously, absolutely seriously. 4 companies I rang, and they all said exactly the same thing, what benefits
So
you're
getting your loft insulated is a tricky booking.
Well, if you're on benefits, it's lovely, Jubbly, to come and do it for free. But if you want to pay for it,
they're not interested.
Get your grandson to do it. That's what I did.
That's extraordinary. Have you got chickens and animals or anything like that knocking around?
Well, we did have chickens. We did have chickens until my wife's birthday, the first year we were here, and the fox had a lot of them, and I said, I'm not doing that anymore. So.
Yeah, that's every time I speak to somebody who had chickens, it's the same story. You can wire those things up as much as you like, but that fox will get in somehow, right?
Well, he barked at them. The fox was outside the chicken's run, and he sat on the lawn, and he made the most amazing barking noise, and they all dropped dead of heart attacks.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Wow, they were barked to death.
He hasn't got them. Went down there, they were all dead.
Man alive. The old wily fox, with a multitude of talents they've got. Not always desirable. Nick, thank you for that. The fox barked the chickens to death. Did you ever hear that? But I guess it would. If you're sitting there, like a chicken knows that a fox is a horrible bit of kit, right? They know instantly that thing wants to eat me. So if it sits there, almost looking at you in the eye, barking away in a howling, menacing manner that says, I'm going to eat you, in kind of chicken language, yeah, I guess you would. They all drop dead. The only reason I asked him that was, again, about the sustainability of living. So, you haven't got to buy your eggs. If you've got chickens, that's great. I had a friend down the road, they had a couple of chickens, but again, same thing happened, and it became a bit of a faff for them. They didn't have a big garden or anything, but enough to have a little pen for the chickens. I don't think they got eaten by foxes, but I think it became a bit of a chore to make sure they were attended to and all that goes with it. But yeah, free eggs. Obviously, if you can grow your own veg, gets into the sort of good life territory. You've got all of that going on as well. Nice to live like that, but I'd suggest that most people either couldn't afford to. Most people couldn't afford to. But even if you could, it's the kind of time equation, isn't it? Like with anything, there's loads of things we could all do with our lives if we had loads of time. We tend not to have loads of time. We are time short. 0344 499 1000. Back with you, coming next on Talk.
And I think he probably wants to sort of give not necessarily an update, but just give an indication of thanks to the people that supported him.
You know what I think of the monarchy. It just worries me.
Yeah, but he's living with cancer. That was an expression that was used not necessarily to him, but he's talking about people living with it, and you can do so. But, to do that, you've got to live with that chemotherapy, and which is incredibly draining. It effectively is poisoning your system.
Yep.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 7 minutes to 3 o'clock. Don't go away, Simon, with you in a second. It's the voice of doom, day 21. No one has got this right for 21 or 20 days. It might go today. It's the mystery voice with a political angle to it. The clues we've been giving you is think it's a politician you're looking for, a Labour politician, no longer an MP. And I will say cabinet position, all right? I'll add a further clue there. So it's Labour, so therefore it's not David Cameron. Somebody always guesses David Cameron, even if it's a female voice for some reason. Not David Cameron, not George Osborne, not Ian Duncan Smith, not Nick Clegg, none of those people. Here's the question, who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
If you think you know, 87222, you can message in but don't phone. Here it is again.
Political decisions were taken.
This is the 21st day of doing it. It's the longest voice of doom we've ever had. If we get the correct answer after the headlines at 3, we will reveal all. If we don't, it simply rolls over to tomorrow. One more time on the voice.
Political decisions were taken.
I did say at the outset, look, I wouldn't say this is the most famous politician ever, but then the counter to that is we've done loads of voice and dooms where we've had people who clearly aren't massively famous that have been guessed within a day. We've had foreign politicians that have been guessed. We had Monica Lewinsky, which went, I think, in about a day or two. A couple of German chancellors have been in there. Louise Casey, that was previously our longest one, by the way, but it still went in 14 days. This one has rumbled on forever. Let's have one more listen.
Political decisions were taken.
87222. Come on, we need a winner. On the other side of the news, we shall reveal all. Simon is in Derby. How are you doing, Simon?
Not bad. How are you, Ian? Okay.
Yeah, good, thanks. Nice to have you on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, heat pumps.
Heat pumps. Yeah, we talked a lot about those. Divide the room, these ones, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of very sceptical about any of these things, as I think a lot of people are. And I think my unabiding question will be when we've done all the things that all these net zero folk want us to do, and we found out that nothing actually has changed, how do we get our money back?
That's a very good point. That should be written into the contract, shouldn't it? Yeah. Well, if it turns out this was all BS, can we have our money back?
Well, why not? I mean, it's everything in life. If people aren't made accountable for their actions, they just get away with blue murder, and it's just not on. Anyway, rant over. I got a heat pump in my cottage. Actually, it's about 100-year-old cottage, and I thought, I've got no chance of getting one of these. And if you don't have 15 mil bore pipe, that's the first step, because you've got to dig all the walls out and have that's expensive. And then you've got to have double radiators in the room, and you've got to have an EPC of C. And I qualified on all counts. Happy days.
Yeah. Did it bother you that you had to change things like the piping and the rads?
No, I did. Well, thankfully my cottage had been very well renovated, and all the work had been done. But the guy must have had hindsight to know what was coming, because it was done about 15 years ago. But every room's got double radiators. The piping was fine. Anyway, I ended up getting just under 10 grand's worth of a boiler for 1,500 quid. Thank you.
What, due to a subsidy?
Yeah, because that's a subsidy. It's 7.5. It went from 5 to 7.5. Actually, what tipped the balance was I was going to get a conventional boiler, they put the boiler tax came out, which they said it wasn't a boiler tax, but in fact it was a boiler tax. So the red mist came down, and I wrote to my MP and said, "This is a boiler tax," and he said, "No, it's not." And I said, "Well, awfully sorry, chaps, but it is."
Yeah.
So if you speak to the big Worcester Boss is the one I wrote to, and they said they install 30,000 boilers a year, of which they have to insist that so many boilers that they do are whatever, life-saving boilers. If not, they get fined, and that's what it's all about. So, yeah, you're with me now. So that's what made me think, well, I wonder if I can get a heat source pump. And I could, and I did it, and they fitted it within a day. Fitting is a really big thing, I think. You've got to make sure you get a great fitter.
Have they stopped the subsidies now, though?
No, I don't think so. Right. That's why we're all getting taxed to hell.
That's very true. And what about this? You know, it's often said that they're just not particularly good in the sense as to get if you want it at 23 degrees, then it's really got to work its backside off to get there.
Well, I had mine done when it was done in the depths of winter. Admittedly, the books that came with it were like a Japanese sort of dictionary. It was very complicated. It was very complicated, but I fathomed through it how to work it, and I did have and still have a backup gas cast iron fire if needed, but I find there's copious amounts of hot water. The heating in the rooms is absolutely bang on, and Scottish Power, naming no names, they actually do a special rate for people who do have heat source pumps, which I presume work off the smart meter. I don't know, but I've not had any problems.
So you got it for 15. So I got a Worcester boiler as well, and that I guess what would that cost? About $2,000 a new one now.
Yeah. Well, that was it. About $2,500 for one.
Yeah, there it is. Listen, great call. A good news story on the heat pumps. Oh, Simon, thank you. Great call, Simon in Derby. We'll have more of that. Have you embraced the green revolution without even realising you did? And I'm not really talking about doing it because you're a mad environmentalist who looks at Ed Miliband as the Messiah and you're a fanboy of Red Ed. It's not that. It's whether you thought, I can save a few quid here, whether it's an EV car, a heat pump, panels on your roof, or a windmill in your garden. We've yet to find anyone who's got a windmill in their garden. Is that you? Lines are open. We'll take more calls on this on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock here on Talk, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back to the home of Common Sense. Coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock, we are talking about, well, all things to do with net zero, but from a slightly different angle. Downing Street refusing to confirm if Energy Secretary Ed Miliband will stay in his role. They couldn't give an unequivocal yes, which is always rather interesting. Labour clashing over net zero, of course, on the day that it's announced house builders must install solar panels on new homes by 2027. Is that even doable, by the way? Is that, I mean, logistically, is that possible? Is it, does the stuff exist to do that? Bearing in mind they're talking about 1.5 million homes. Also this afternoon, Donald Trump has acknowledged Russia's war on Ukraine as a full-scale invasion, according to a leaked detail of his minerals deal with President Zelensky. It's interesting that it's come to this. It's another sort of turnaround for the Trump administration on this, but at the moment, Ukraine and America are shaking hands on this, and the bad guys are again, as if they weren't already, Russia. And the former president of the Muslim Association of Britain has called the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October the 7th a lie and defended hostage-taking as a very important part of resistance. Who are these animals? We'll have more on that in a few moments' time. 0344 499 1000. So, the voice of doom, day 21. This is the voice you've been charged with identifying.
Political decisions were taken.
Who is that? It is not Chris Leslie. I remember Chris Leslie just. It's not John McDonnell, who didn't hold the cabinet position, of course. It's not Alistair Darling, Geoffrey Robinson, Peter Mandelson, Tristram Hunt, Michael Meacher, Peter Hain. It is not. But, thank the Lord, we do have a winner. We do have, somebody has got it right. Thank the Lord for, Stephen Byers got it right. No, Stephen Byers was the right answer. Stephen Byers was the correct answer. Glyn Holford was the only person to message in with the name Stephen. Did anybody else get it today? No, it was just Glyn. Well done, Glyn. Stephen Byers, who had, by the way, a fairly extensive time in government. He was Secretary of State for Transport. This is all under Tony Blair. He was Secretary of State for the Board of Trade, took over from Peter Mandelson. He was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, he was Minister for Schools. And, of course, he was the North Tyneside MP for a long, long time. So this is a guy that, you know, had a great time. He left under a little bit of a cloud, as it turns out. And it was also, and I'd forgotten this, but it was his advisor. Do you remember the story? It's a great day to bury bad news. Do you remember that? It was his political advisor, Joe Moore. This was an email that was sent out on September the 11th. Can you believe it? 2001. The advisor sent out a memo saying it's a good day to bury bad news. Quite aside from the word bury being perhaps a little inappropriate, the idea that you would correlate a disaster and a terror attack that big with, oh, this is handy, we can put all sorts of things. Anyway, that and a couple of other things that happened subsequently, he eventually walked the plank. Stephen Byers, that was him. He's now 72, no idea what he's up to these days. That was the voice of doom, which means we have another one tomorrow, a brand new voice. And thank goodness for that. I think it was getting time, wasn't it? It was getting time. Now, the former president of the Muslim Association of Britain has described the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October the 7th as, quote, a lie. Yep, he really went there. Anas Al-Tikriti, who served as president of the Muslim Association of Britain, characterised the mass killing and rape of Israeli soldiers and taking hostages as a very important part of resistance. The Muslim Council distanced itself from his comments, stating he does not represent the organisation's views. Well, we will never know. On that, we take their word. Keith Fraser is the founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement. Keith, good afternoon to you. This is all pretty grim, mucky stuff. But sort of, I'm bound to say I genuinely am not surprised that this person said this. And I also think there's probably other people in his sphere that have exactly the same view.
Well, I hold the same view as you, Ian. Look, Anas al-Tikriti has links with Hamas. Of that, there's no question. And also, what is the Muslim Association of Britain? It has been termed the British branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. What is the Muslim Brotherhood? It's one of the earliest Islamist organizations. What was its opening or founding slogan was Islam is the solution. Hamas, as you know, is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. What does Hamas stand for? Islamic Resistance Movement, not Palestinian Resistance Movement. Yeah. The Muslim Association of Britain are effectively the British branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. There's only one organization, or if you like, a coalition, who I know who actually pay any homage, and that's the Stop the War Coalition, or should I say this particular coalition that is out every week on their hate marches, but really what they do hate is the West. I can also give you a classic example of a recent terrorist outrage in Kashmir. 26 Hindus killed by Islamic terrorists known as the Resistance Front, Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Resistance Front. It's interesting how all these extreme Islamic groups are resisting something. I'll tell you what they're resisting. They are resisting the Western civilization. They are resisting our liberal freedoms, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of worship. And unfortunately, this is of no surprise. This organization should be banned. David Cameron has basically said that in the past. And of course, it's no surprise, Ian. And there are many people in that field, in inverted commas, who hold exactly the same thoughts, very sadly.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago having a row with an editor on this point, because if you remember, the Brotherhood found themselves around all sorts of interesting tables at the top of government, on Question Time, goodness knows what. You stick the word brotherhood on the end of something and people think it's some kind of benevolent charity or some kind of measured unit of people who are there to supply balance and understanding. And of course, it was never anything of the sort. It was beautifully disguised. And yet people in mainstream media bought into this, pack of lies, that this was some sort of group that we should be talking to, getting an understanding of other people's ways of life. I don't need an understanding of what it's like to live in 1567, frankly. Of course, what we've seen since then, somebody telling us it's a lie, bearing in mind the atrocities on October the 7th were caught on camera. Much that was caught on camera came from the body-worn camera of the people that carried out the attacks as well, Keith, just to sort of compound the futility and the miserable nature of this creature and his reply that it was a lie.
Well, the man is sick, as is many people, or the culture that is largely going on in places like Gaza, where they learn from the womb to hate the West, to hate Jews, Christians, any kind of liberal, free Western society. Like I said earlier, there is a pattern here. Hamas, Islamic Resistance Movement, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is effectively the Muslim Association of Britain, which Mr. al-Tikriti, I think, started, is the British branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Islam is the solution is their slogan. The recent terrorist atrocities in Pakistan, done by the Resistance Front. This is not resistance about anything that they go on about. They claim all these sorts of lies like occupation and all this kind of nonsense. It's resistance against the West. And we here need to wake up. People like Mr. al-Tikriti are not just few and far between. We have many in our midst in Britain and the whole of the West. Yeah. And the West needs to wake up, because it will be too late before we actually do something about this.
And again, just to go back to what I said a second ago, Keith, I think one of the problems we have is that there are politicians and establishment figures who won't call this out because they are, scared of being seen as either racist or that curious phrase, Islamophobic, this kind of stuff. So they resist and again talk about, well, we must connect, and horrible words like that, with different people and educate them to, this is a philosophy, a twisted idea of a faith that has been allowed to have free rein for so long, and he's not alone in this view. We shouldn't be entertaining these voices. We shouldn't be acknowledging that there might be something in what he said. But I'm hearing, I look online, I don't know whether to laugh or cry at some of the people who endorse this kind of garbage.
Well, many have been guests on talk radio, maybe not so much your show, Ian. People like Piers Morgan has had a number of people from Mohammed Hijab, and et cetera, those type of very, very odious characters. And there are many of them. You only need to go online and see some of the sermons given in mosques around London and further afield in the UK to know that there is an elephant in the room. And if we don't do something about it, I don't even like to call it elephant in the room, I'm an animal lover. But if we don't do something about it, Ian, believe me, these people, it's a bit like October the 7th. Many of the people killed on October the 7th in Israel from kibbutzim near Gaza, they were peaceniks. They were people who thought if you hold out the hand of peace, they will shake it. No. What we need to do is the opposite. If you show any weakness, they will take advantage of it. And that is the very sad truth that this government and many people in our country and the West have not gotten a hold of yet.
Indeed. Keith, very thorough stuff. Great to have you on. Let's speak again. Keith Fraser, thank you. Founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement. Absolutely nailing it there. It is quite curious that not only do these people live among us, and there are people that have these views, they're really not shouted down in any kind of any sort of authentic, meaningful way. Because again, you know, that's where I want to hear Prime Minister Starmer or Cooper, Yvette Cooper, people like that, to get really animated, not to have cobbled together a two-line response that sounds all rather, you know, we will not tolerate this kind of language. You know, I want to hear her say, you know, these people are animals. They live in a different century. They're not like us. There's something wrong with them. This is a group, an organisation, Hamas supporting characters that wish nothing but hatred and death upon the West and our values and our thoughts and our ideas. And whilst it does, look, I say this every time because I sense I have to, but I shouldn't have to. Of course, those people don't represent everyone that happens to be a Muslim. And I've spoken to more Muslims than I care to remember who have called out these characters over the years. But it's these characters that should be called out, right? They should be called out by everybody. There should be no, well, you know, I don't agree with what he said, but. Do you remember that? We had a little bit of that after 7/7, a lot of it after 9/11. I don't agree with what they did, but. Whoa, can you quit the but, mate? We don't need buts in this one. We really, there's no caveat to mass murder, all right? There's no caveat to that. Brian says, couldn't that quote to say October the 7th was a lie be classed as a hate speech? Let's see if the police knock on his door. Yeah, I don't know where he's based. It's a really good point, Brian. Thank you. I don't know where he's based, but, well, you'd think if, you know, saying the wrong thing on a WhatsApp group was classed as hate speech, you might imagine suggesting a mass genocide was hate speech. You're denying that and calling it a lie. You might think that would come right under the category. 3:15. Let's go back to your calls. Don't go away, Sarah. With you in a moment. Khalid is in Leicester. Just on that point we've just been talking about, Khalid, what are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Yeah, I think, look, first of all, this spokesperson for the, I don't know what organisation it was, but it just came on just now. Mm-hmm. The thing is, look, each point you're making, it's the same old narrative, same old propaganda, rhetorics that are coming out. Hate marches, etc., etc. This is ridiculous. People on the marches or people everywhere across the country, yes, do hate oppression. That's what the key should be. It's not about hating the West or hating. I mean, I was born here, brought up here, lived all my life here. Right? We don't. I live with people all from all faiths. We went to school together. Still got the friendships, etc. The thing is, we have to look at the context of what is happening out there. I mean, how can we not abhor and mourn the innocent death that is taking place on a daily basis? And we got Israel.
Which can stop, of course, if hostages were released, then there is an end.
That's a ridiculous.
Well, that is the official line at the moment of Israel. This can all stop.
Israel will tell you all sorts that the ambulances didn't have the lights on. They won't have it. But we found out from the recording that they lie after lie after lie.
I'm not in any way going to defend people who, in the confusion and the fog, or as it's called, of war. On any side of this, and when bad things happen, they should be called out. I totally get that, but the kernel of where this began, I'm talking about October the 7th here, has to be placed at the door of Hamas, right? And there are plenty of people who would quite happily endorse them. They quite happily say, no, these are people. We see it on those hate marches, the anti-Israel marches, whatever you want to call them. We can all see what they are, Khalid.
Ian, this is the context didn't start on October the 7th. This has been ongoing since 1948.
I get. Of course, I understand that, but I was making the point specifically about October the 7th because that's exactly what this hate preacher said. He called it a lie.
No, it's not. Look, the thing is
that is a lie, though, isn't it? What he said.
When you've been oppressing people, we don't make an excuse for what they did. My point is, when you continuously oppress, there is going to be repercussions.
But what he said was a lie, right? He said it was a lie, but what he said was a lie.
No, you see what it is. On October the 7th, the facts are, obviously, we still haven't got the actual nitty-gritty because the Apache helicopters came, their missiles bombed. Missiled all those cars that were there. It's not possible to have a gun and shoot cars and blow them up. So obviously there's a lot of things which we don't know about. Even the Israelis themselves.
Right. So you are part of the I don't agree with it, but sort of brigade. That there was something else going on.
I'm not saying I don't agree with it, but I'm saying my point is, look, if we're going to condemn oppression, we should condemn oppression across the board.
Of course, and everybody should condemn that. But we are talking about October the 7th. That was a terrorist attack, right? That was mass murder, mass slaughter on a grand scale, and all the other things that went with it. You would acknowledge that, Khalid, right?
Ian, look, first of all, let's get to the crux of this, right? In meaning that, look, Murdoch is on the list of the people who are totally supportive and have supported Netanyahu on his personal list. We know that. Everybody knows that now. It's an open secret.
I don't know if it's a list, is it? I mean, it's just like most people support the idea that Israel is a democratically elected Western progressive country, and the thing next door to it isn't.
So if a democratically elected country goes and commits mass murder, rape, which has been documented, and we got British nationals.
No one's going to defend that. I wouldn't defend that either.
So that's what I'm saying. Why are we trying to defend the indefensible?
Well, I think what people are trying to get to on this argument is to say, look, you're right. This goes back to the 1940s. We're talking about, not just shy of a century here. We could go on into all sorts of different battles. On this specific area, October the 7th, Hamas invaded and carried out mass murder and slaughter on a grand scale. We know that.
So you're saying we shouldn't back up Ukraine as well then, under the same principle, because they've been invaded, they've been attacked. So therefore, we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine as well. That's what I'm saying. There's no consistency in application. There's no.
Not every battle is the same, but I think most people do support Ukraine, and therefore, by definition, would probably support whoever is the person that's been oppressed, right, or the person that's been attacked. And in this case, Israel were attacked.
Ian, the people in the Israeli government, they stem from terrorist organizations. The Haganah, the Irgun. You look it up. I mean, what do you call it? Menachem Begin. Obviously, he was counted as a terrorist, and he came up into the government. So did the IDF. That was the Haganah, the terrorist group. They actually infiltrated and they joined. The IDF became one. So you got terrorists joining the national the army. So the thing is, this and their mindset is always there. And in fact, the locals, as we know, the documentary where what's his name again? On Channel 4 just came on a few days ago. The Daniela Weiss, should I say? Right? So they say this is ours. We don't care about the basically. The bottom line is all of the land is ours. We don't care whatever happens. They can go from here. They can go to any other country, or they die. Whichever they stay, they can starve to death. We're not bothered. But this is ours.
Would you rather live under an Israeli regime or under Hamas?
I would rather live in Palestine.
Okay, you'd rather live in Palestine under Hamas than under the Israeli regime?
It's not a matter of Hamas. Hamas will never. This oppression was going on even before Hamas.
Okay, but Hamas and all they stand for and their way of life and their ideals and values, you'd rather live under that than you would under, well, how we live in the United Kingdom.
I am telling you, if I had an option to live in Palestine or Israel, I would live in Palestine. I would rather be oppressed.
So you'd rather live in Palestine than Leicester?
No matter Palestine or Leicester.
No, seriously, I'm not being facetious. It's a serious question. I'm interested.
No, look, I've been.
You got a choice, okay? Here's a ticket to Palestine.
If God
you can leave Leicester and live in Palestine. Which one would you rather live in?
No, if God has put me here in Leicester, it's for a reason. If I was born in Palestine and I lived in Palestine, I'd prefer to live wherever I've been brought up in. I'd rather stay there. That's my point. Is look, Ian, it's not a matter of where you want to live. It's a matter of seeing the truth and plain black and white. People.
But I think it's not about picking the specific house and whether it's got enough rooms. I don't mean it that specifically. I'm talking about the kind of system you want to live within and under.
No, obviously, I've never complained about the UK, Ian. My point is, we're talking about Palestine here. We're talking about Israel. Yeah. We're talking about the oppression. It's not a matter of.
You would feel less oppressed and more comfortable in Palestine than you would in Tel Aviv.
I would put it this way: I would never live in Tel Aviv with the amount of terrorists that are in their government and the amount of terrorism that the mindset that they have.
You think that's a greater, a more troubling mindset than Hamas?
101%, Ian. Look at the facts speak for themselves. Look what have they done since 7th of October.
Right.
You're saying 7th of October was unjustified. So since then, since the 7th of October, everything has been justified, and we're backing it. We're giving them bombs. We're sending them off. We're sending them spy planes from here. We're sending them ammunition from here via the Cyprus RAF base. We're doing everything to support them, and yet you're saying that oh yes, Hamas are the problem. No, even before Hamas were in existence. This oppression was taking place.
All right, Khalid, thank you. Send us a postcard from your broken balcony. 0344 499 1000. That's his view. You might want to respond to that. We'll talk to Sarah in just a second. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
To bow down to dangerous DEI policies. I am concerned, and I will say the vast majority of the people in the Corps and the armed forces, and probably in all sectors of public life in the United Kingdom, are concerned that this political push will lead to underqualified people being pushed into high up positions where they could cause injuries and deaths. And that's what this whole situation is about.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Peter, who says, I'm currently building a new house, which includes air source heat pump, underfloor heating, solar panels, battery storage, more insulation than you can shake a stick at, and the cost so far is 25 to 30,000 just for the green energy savings. And when the house is complete, if all this stuff doesn't keep my wife warm, I'm toast. Excuse the pun. There's a great deal of investment in that. I don't know whether Peter's doing it because he's a kind of fan of Ed Miliband. I doubt it. Or whether it's just that maybe this is a more efficient way of... You know, everybody wants that. Before anybody started talking about this, we would talk about lagging your loft, wouldn't you? That would be a standard thing. Or cavity wall insulation. Nobody thought that was wacky. Unless it doesn't work, of course. But, you know, the idea that you could do something to your house and it's going to be a bit cheaper and make your house warmer was just logic. I guess we've got that now with booster rockets. Sarah's in Cornwall. What have you got for us, Sarah? Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Nice to have you with us. What are you thinking?
Right, it's to do with the buying into the green agenda.
Yeah.
I certainly don't buy into it. However, we live in Cornwall and we don't have any gas supply, so we were on an oil boiler previously. Yep. Sure. And about 18 months ago, we saw that there was a scheme where the government were offering to pay for solar panels and air source heat pumps.
Yeah, sure.
If you were in certain situations. And myself and my partner both work. But we do receive universal credit, and I thought it was all too good to be true, to be honest. So I rang this company, and there were no catches. Absolutely, it was. We had wall cavity insulation already, and we had loft insulation, but the loft insulation wasn't thick enough, so they lagged the roof again. We had scaffolders everywhere. We had 16 solar panels installed. We had a brand new air source heat pump.
Wow.
With a brand new boiler, and we were at our boiler. Oil boiler was about 18 years old and needed replacing. It was literally hanging on by a thread. So
this was all funded by the Tories?
It was all funded by the Tories.
There you go. Yeah. Today, Kemi Badenoch's going, we don't believe in this net zero stuff, but they gave you God knows how much worth of kit.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to the project manager,
yep.
And it was over £40,000 worth.
Wow.
And which is just absolutely phenomenal.
But it's working nicely. Everything's there.
It is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there you go. And on top of all of that, Sarah, and I'm sorry to cut in, but we've got a dash for the break. But of course, you are saving the planet and all those polar bears as well. Plus, the Costa Rican golden toad will now survive another day. Sarah in Cornwall, thank you. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to John Pienaar, who's over there in Washington at the moment, on that Ukraine-US minerals deal. What does it mean? What does it look like? And what do we take from it? Details coming next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 3:30. Now, Donald Trump has admitted, possibly for the first time, that Russia's war on Ukraine was a full-scale invasion in leaked details of his mineral deal with President Zelensky. The agreement confirms US military aid will be funded by Ukrainians' mineral wealth, seen as a diplomatic win for Kyiv. It also pledges that the US won't obstruct Ukraine's efforts to join the European Union. Joining me now live from Washington, D.C., Times radio presenter and all-round political legend, John Pienaar is with us. John, good afternoon to you.
Hi to you, Ian. Yeah, it's all going on here in Washington, D.C. We got that deal that you talk about there that was overnight, and just in the last a couple of hours, we get the story that Donald Trump has agreed to send Ukraine some £50 million worth of defence kit. Yeah. But here's the thing: this is a sale. It's not a loan. A lot of what's gone to Kyiv has been in the form of grants and loans and kit that was donated by supporter countries. This is has been sold. And what does that tell you? It tells you a lot, really. When you look between the lines of the deal that was agreed yesterday, and when you take that on top, what's America's role in the world now? No longer, very clearly, it's all there now, right in front of us, no longer the world's policeman, no longer the defender of freedom and democracy around the world. The byword is business is business. It is strictly business. And this is Donald Trump, I suppose, in a nutshell. And yes, Ukraine will say, look, we got a deal. And that is a lot better than being yelled at in the Oval Office by the president and the vice president. But what they will really want is somehow to see the president put his weight behind Putin and push him towards the negotiating table in a ceasefire. And where that is concerned, Ian, it's still, well, pretty much anyone's guess. He was asked at one of those town hall meetings last night, would this deal inhibit Putin's aggression? And he said it could. And he might as well have added, unless of course it doesn't. So I guess that goes on, and we're going to see Kyiv, and we're going to see London and others saying, please use this pressure where it's going to be most effective on Putin.
There was a sense, John, wasn't there, before this, that this was going to be almost a takeover, a subjugation of Ukraine by America. This mineral deal would be incredibly advantageous financially. Essentially, America would go in and they'd hoover up anything that's of value and call it ours. Thank you for settling the debt, Mr. Zelensky, and away we go. Yeah. It hasn't turned out quite like that. This is not about money exchanging hands in the conventional sense.
No, it's very different to that. This is, as I say, a business contract. The terms of it are much more like 50-50 than the earlier deal, the one that was on the table when we had that bust-up in the Oval Office. That was described, well, the generous term for it was coercive, and the frank term for it was something like gangsterism, which had something to be said for it. They were treating, in that original draft, treating Ukraine the way you treat a country having conquered that country, when a country is absolutely on its knees and at your mercy. This is much more even-handed, although America still stands to gain a good deal if it follows through, if there are mineral profits to be exploited, which of course requires some sort of peace to happen in the meantime. So join the dots, and will we see Donald Trump get stuck in there and try and bring those profits closer and put some pressure on Putin? Well, as I say, we'll see. But the nagging worry, I guess, in the background is that Donald Trump has been pretty clear in the past. He's so keen to do business with Putin too, maybe even in some ways keener. And that's going to worry, I think, going to worry Kyiv. It's going to worry a lot of people in Europe. It certainly pleased them to the back teeth in the Kremlin.
What do we make, how significant is that comment that America, for the first time, certainly at the moment, using that phrase full-scale invasion to describe Russia's war on Ukraine? Do you think, would that have been discussed for those wordings to be used? Or was this just Mr. Trump and his administration suddenly having a different view or approach to what is happening, recognising perhaps more global feelings?
Look, for sure, that is a whole lot more positive than the kind of language we got from President Trump about Putin not so long ago. You'll remember that Truth Social posting where President Putin described Zelensky as a dictator.
Yeah.
And for a while after that, neither the president nor any of those around the president were even willing to discuss the Russian invasion in terms of illegal aggression. Well, now there they are, branded on the face of this contract as illegal invaders and aggressors. So a shift in tone there, and that will certainly be welcome in Kyiv. It's a slightly bizarre thing that you need to have this conversation in the first place. Why on earth is the United States of America hesitating to call an illegal invasion of Ukraine an illegal invasion of Ukraine? Right. But these are the strange waters that we swim in now. Kyiv can go on hoping, and I guess the rest of us can just keep on saying, well, if you've got the interests of Ukraine at heart, good luck with that.
And, of course, the curious, contradictory way that Mr. Trump seems to work is that, you know, next week we might get a statement that seems advantageous or generous to Russia in some sort of way. Everything that's been said so far will be sort of forgotten or put to the side, and we'll hear some kind of endorsing statement from Mr. Trump about why Putin is the man to deal with and everything is tickety-boo.
Yeah, well, I mean, you sum up Donald Trump there absolutely in a nutshell. You never quite know what is going to come out of the president's mouth from day to day, from hour to hour. And that is, I guess, almost the defining uncertainty of the age in which we now live, where the global balance of strategic power, where the relationship between America and its historic allies in the transatlantic alliance on the other side of the Atlantic, all of these things can ebb and flow and change and shift back again, pretty much on a mood swing of the man in the White House, just over the road, Ian, from where I'm sitting now.
Just a final point, John. I know we've got to go. You're on air yourself shortly. In terms of Mr. Trump, 100 days in, what's the mood over there in the States in terms of how he's doing? I listened to Mr. Trump describe it. He said it's the best 100 days in US political history. Nothing has ever beaten. Every record has been smashed. Others not so generous.
Well, you can say that again. I mean, if you're looking for a polarized country, if you're going on to a grand holiday tour of polarized countries, you might as well start here because they don't get much more polarized. And your view of Donald Trump's first 100 days will very much depend on which side of the aisle you are. Are you from a blue state, a red state? Are you a MAGA person? Are you one who absolutely hates the MAGA tribe? What you can say is that moods have changed in these last 100 days. It's been polarized. It is polarized, but there has been a significant shift, not among the red-hatted MAGA faithful, but among the independent, the swing voters who are now really significantly much less happy about the handling of the economy and even such things as the handling of immigration policy. Most Americans like the idea of deporting migrants who come to this country illegally and then commit crimes. It's not hard to get a majority for that, but the way that it's being done, with people being rounded up, with due process of law not being followed in some cases, that has got more Americans unhappy than happy. And of course, just yesterday, we showed the economy of this country shrank by 0.3%. That wasn't all to do with tariffs, but it had something to do with the tariff trade war. And the next quarter, if it's like that, America will officially be in recession. And then it's going to be much harder for the president to do what he said yesterday and said, this is Biden's slowdown. Because by then, for most people, it'll very clearly be Trump's.
John, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your days over there in Washington. John Pienaar, Times radio presenter and political journalist, of course, of many, many years. Thank you to John Pienaar with us on the programme. More comments in from you. This is a great one from John in Bexley. Back to that question of, have you ever held your nose and embraced the green revolution? John says, if I want to put solar panels on my roof, is my neighbour obliged to remove sycamore from his garden that casts a shadow over my house? It's a good point. I guess that the sycamore in your garden is of no benefit to your neighbour, right? Aesthetically, I know aesthetics aren't a measure of planning permission as such. Well, they can be, but generally. And light isn't always a measure of whether you're going to get it or not. People think it always is, but it isn't necessarily. And view isn't always necessarily. But if the sycamore tree in John's garden is hanging over into John's garden, but it's the neighbour's sycamore tree, I'm assuming that it would make no difference to their sycamore if you chopped away. I mean, always good to have a chat with them first, of course, diplomatically speaking, which I'm sure you would, John. Martin is in Exeter on panels and all things green. How you doing, Martin?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Nice to have you with us.
Yes, and you don't hate me. So I put some panels on my house in Spain.
Yep.
And I put some panels on my house in the UK. Both working brilliantly, obviously in Spain. The ones in the UK, 10,000 quid, 12 panels, 3 batteries. Don't have any electricity cost anymore. It sort of reduced it by about 80-90%.
Wow.
And that was 10 grand. Same thing in Spain, 3 grand.
But wow. I mean, the difference there is massive.
Follow the money. So I did a little bit of research, looked at my panels. I've got 12 of them on my roof in the UK. You can buy them £120 each.
120 quid each.
Yes, and then you need a bit of you need a thing called an inverter. They're about 600-800 quid.
Yeah.
So somebody, I mean, they're very good. They're absolutely brilliant. Do the job, but somebody's making an awful lot of money.
Is it going to? Surely there's going to be a point when buying a solar panel is like nipping to home base and buying a bit of wood.
Well, it already is. I mean, you see these great big shiny sort of panels on people's roofs. You can pick it up with 2 fingers. It weighs nothing.
Yeah.
The problem is that you have to stop the wind getting underneath and blowing it off.
Good point.
On my other house, they were fitted 15 years ago when the government was desperate to get people to fit solar panels. I get 65 pence a unit back from the government.
So it's costing you 0. You're in profit.
Yes. And here's the crazy thing. I get that even if I use the electricity. So if I generate 60p's worth of electricity on my panels, use it, I still get the 60p.
Wow. I mean, that's not going to last forever, is it?
18 years left on the contract.
Oh, really? That's all right. That's quite a while. I thought you were going to say 18 months.
No, 18 years. It was a 25-year contract, and I bought the house a few years ago. But anyway, the point I'm making, somebody's making an awful lot of money, and all this stuff is coming from China.
100%. 100%. And what I found interesting, I've spoken to so many people on this particular point, Martin, when I think a chap yesterday, I said, do you really think when Ed Miliband talks about, we should be sort of at the forefront of the green revolution, manufacturing stuff, selling, does he really think we're going to take on China for producing solar panels?
Oh, he's mad. So
Mad Ed. Yeah.
There you go, Mad Ed. So
that is the only answer to that, isn't it? It's just bonkers. And I doubt whether it'll be there for much longer. Listen, it's a great call, Martin. Thank you very much indeed, Martin in Exeter, on solar panel joy over there. And that's a great example of what we said at the beginning. No one's denying the science of these things can work. Whether you can energise an entire country once and whether you've got the infrastructure and all the kit to make this happen is another matter. I mean, if everybody ordered solar panels for their roof tomorrow in the UK, I don't think you'd be getting your order anytime soon. It'd be like the car backlog a year or so ago. One comes in here from Matt in Manchester. Interesting one. He says, I was listening to Tiff, that was Tiff Lynch, the acting chair of the Police Federation, demanding more money for police officers. Makes me sick. The police lost English consent when they covered their eyes to the grooming gangs. And if any plod says they never knew, they're a liar. They all knew and kept silent to protect their gold-plated pensions. Well, politely, I would disagree with that, Matt. It would be extraordinary if every single copper knew what was going on in forces where some of this wasn't even happening. It would also predate the existence of many officers who are currently serving in the British Police Force, who weren't even around, not even serving in any shape or form at that point. And certainly when I've spoken to police officers, 2 things really. They would, every conversation, are as outraged as any other member of the public. Cops are members of the public too. Yes, there will be, we know that there were areas of law enforcement that didn't act. Of course there were, but I would, again, politely suggest that in no way could that possibly, logistically or otherwise, represent the views of most officers who would never have come into contact with those kind of cases. But I hear what you're saying. The other thing I would say is that police officers would laugh if they thought they had a gold-plated pension. But they do pay more into it than I think any other job in the country. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
So what he does, and less now, thankfully, so it's progressively getting to the point where I need him less, but he does flashback interruptions. So when I first got him, I was having probably about 5 or 6 flashbacks a week, and that in itself is debilitating. And when I then got him, they progressively declined to 1 or 2, where this year has been a bit difficult. I'm not sure why, but it's been a bit difficult. However, previous years I would have 1 a month.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This was a common sense point from Don in Chelmsford, and I think this gets to the nub of the problem that Ed Miliband and this government have got when they talk about gazillions of pounds, windmills, wind farms, solar panels on every single roof. And Don says, we spend money on the wrong things. We should pay police and prison officers top money. We should look after ex-service personnel. We should fund elderly care. We should repair our roads. So when you have a government that say we're not going to give people, even on those on just £12,000 a year is too much money to get a winter fuel allowance, but we are going to stick a load of panels on top of the roof next door because they're building a house there. And it's not that might be great going forward, but at the moment, when you've got a crisis on our roads, in education, in health, in the prison service, in the police, crime off the scale, when all of that is happening, and you've got a government that seems more interested in that, you know, how often do you... Sadiq Khan is the greatest example of a man that gets more animated about a car that has the wrong engine in it driving into his capital than he does about a teenager getting stabbed to death. Check out, just Google the comments and responses that Sadiq Khan has on one subject compared to another. He will talk more about diversity being our greatest strength than he will about anything else. It's almost just a mantra that you wheel out as if it's a get-out-of-jail card free for everything. We can argue whether it is or not forever, but that's not the point. The point is you want to see your mayor, your leader, your politician, Red Ed, Keir, Yvette, whoever it happens to be, Rayner, Reeves, the whole lot of them. You want to see them more animated, not about your car's engine size or a panel on your roof, but about social care. Old people freezing in the winter. That's the bit. That's the reason why people aren't embracing the Green Revolution as the government would like them to, because it just looks all shades of iffy in that respect. Rachel is in Manchester. On solar panels and heat pumps. How you doing, Rachel?
All right, thank you.
Good. Fire away. What have you got for us?
Well, I've got a heat pump and I've got solar panels, but I got the solar panels about 13 years ago, so I still get a really decent feed-in tariff.
Oh, wow. You were an early adopter, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like an eco warrior or anything like that. It was just purely for...
You've never glued yourself to the M6 then? I'm just asking.
Oh, no.
OK, I'm just checking.
No, definitely haven't. No.
So you got the pan. What made you get them? Did you just think, oh, actually, if I can save a few quid here, this is a good idea?
Yeah. I think at the time they cost about £15,000.
Wow.
And obviously I do see a reduction in my electricity bills. I've got a battery with them though at the minute. I am looking into that. But I get about £500 or £600 back every year. And I live in Oldham, so it's not like I'm, anywhere where it's really sunny all the time.
You're not in the Bahamas secretly, yeah.
No.
So you don't pay for any electricity and you get money back?
I do pay for electricity, which is why I got the heat pump as well. Because I thought, well, even though in the winter you're not getting as much
sun,
I thought, well, if I'm using that and that's running off electric, then I'm going to be saving a bit more money. But my system is a hybrid system, so I still have a gas boiler.
So does one kick in when the other's not working? How does that work?
Yeah, it's supposed to be when, I think it's 5 degrees. When it hits 5 degrees, the boiler kicks in then.
Yeah.
To help the heat pump. So I've not really had an issue with it, apart from when so now, like September, October, when I start putting the heating back on,
yes,
it literally takes about a day and a half.
Does it? To kick in? Because I've never been fully au fait, Rachel, about how it works, but doesn't it suck the outside air and then convert it? Is that the general...
Yeah, something like that.
So if it's pretty darn cold out, if it's freezing in Oldham, and let's be honest here, that can happen quite a lot in the winter.
Oh, it does.
So
a lot,
it's got to do a lot of hard, heavy lifting.
Yes, it does. But I don't think that I am saving any money by having a heat pump at all.
Interesting.
I really don't think. My gas bill is still quite high.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, I've got everything's on electric. The only thing that runs fast
is your heating.
Hot water and when it kicks in.
Yeah.
And my gas bill is still huge.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because my mother-in-law's she's on electricity only. So when I go round there, I look at her smart meter and I notice it's only got one figure. Most of you've got two, haven't you? You've got electric and you've got gas written down. And she's only got one. And I often wonder whether do you save more on that? But I think electricity per unit costs a little more, but I think we use more, or gas pumps away a little harder, doesn't it? Oh, we lost Rachel at that point. I think it was the mention of my mother-in-law, really. She just ran at that point, which, to be fair, she's not the first. Rachel, thank you very much indeed for that. This one in from John on the Isle of Coll. We spent $14,000 on solar panels, 2 batteries and 1 booster for water and a Zappy car charger. Our bills went from 400 quid at the height of the energy crisis to £99. This is per month now. I'm already 300 quid in credit due to the good weather, plus the surplus going into the grid. We charge the car at 2 a.m. using the stored energy in the batteries. Yes, a lot of outlay, but we already feel the benefit. because you get into that stage. You know, when you're standing order, your direct debit, you suddenly go, oh, right, I'm in credit. It's November. I'm nearly not. Nope, December. Nope, not. Definitely January, February, not in credit anymore. And then you get to these months when the weather gets a little better and you're back in the driving seat. But maybe that's the way around it. Get a panel on your roof. Peter Cardwell.
Hello there.
An early adopter of the windmill.
Yes, indeed.
Sounds like a dance move, doesn't it?
Well,
show us your windmill,
it's quite a bad thing, any dance move involving me, believe me.
Yeah. And an early adopter of shorts, I should say. You know,
I am wearing shorts today.
In the calendar year. I mean, often we have to wait till the end of June before the Cardwell legs make an appearance.
Well, not now.
I only know that because it's in my diary from last year. I had a medical appointment the day afterwards. But
you're only human.
Psychiatrist. But you're in the shorts.
Have you worked through the trauma?
Only just coming out the other side, and then you walk in today back in the shorts.
That's it.
But it's a nice day out there, and it's going to be a busy show.
It will be a very busy show. There's some breaking news out of Washington. We think now Reuters and CBS News are reporting that Mike Waltz, who is the National Security Advisor, he and his deputy Alex Wong may be about to be axed, or indeed have been axed, by the Trump administration just 100 days in. So we'll reflect that, of course. Those are reports at the moment. I think they're quite credible reports. We'll see if that's confirmed. We're also talking about Ed Miliband and his green lunacy. Unite, huge union, big backer.